on it. So let's hope I don't do that tonight. I am calling to order the regular meeting of the David Douglas School Board. Please join me for the flag salute. Okay, first up is our student body president's report. Anwar, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Okay, my report. Things at the school that we're currently working on. We are working on Community 101 in the senior student council. So the seniors, we just started, so we don't know quite what we're getting ourselves into, but needless to say, we're excited. We get to work with nonprofit organizations and basically give back to the community. We did a bit of that actually at our last ASB meeting, where clubs came to us and they pitched why they needed funds or so, and we got to decide as a group how we would be able to help these clubs out and provide some funds to them. So that was also really cool. We got to give back to the David Douglas community because that's all we're about, basically. And we're working on, I don't know if I told you guys about this before, but we did a thing called DDHS United. Yeah, probably not. So at an assembly, it sort of grew from, I don't know, it was a discussion we were talking about amongst ourselves, and it just grew amongst my senior student council team members, and I'm thankful for them. They're my team. But we wanted to show David Douglas's unity and show that we are united and that we can be a model for other schools in the community and in the world, basically. So at an assembly, we all wore shirts that spelled out DDHS United, because that's what we believe. And we basically named out a whole bunch of statements that we asked the students at the assembly, so 3,000 plus kids, if they believe with these statements to please stand up. And it was, if you believe if you believe peace is better than war, if you believe love can outweigh hate, unity is better than division, stuff like these. And we just named a whole bunch of statements. And eventually, I would say majority, like all 3,000 kids stood up. And it was just a beautiful sight to just see everyone together. And we asked them all to link arms. And just to see that strength right there, just that unity. And we knew that we could be the example. We can be the change that we want to see in the world. So that was just a beautiful thing. And we wanted to push that as a kind of like our platform, just to like get it out there and make it bigger. So we're working on it right now with like merchandise and things like that. So we're trying to not make it a one-hit wonder, but to continue it on. And that's pretty much what we're doing.
Cool.
Thank you, guys.
Very good. Anything else? How was homecoming? Was homecoming good?
Homecoming was really fun. Oh yeah, I was homecoming king. Not that it matters.
Oh yeah.
Not that it matters or anything.
Okay. Well, as usual, you're welcome to stay, or if you need to get homework done or whatever you want to do. Okay.
Yes.
So we're on to visiting delegations / attendees input. I think we have a list coming up. Okay. I see some students on here. Let's start with Heather Franklin. Let's start with Heather. There's a little thing.
Hello. Heather Franklin. First thing I want to talk about real briefly is I want to thank the board for addressing the hate crimes that happened at the elementary schools. But I also want to point out that it rings a little hollow when we have a school board member who engages in those types of commentary and has yet to apologize to the community or yet for the board to publicly address those comments in any sort of like uniform fashion. It's hard to have some sort of confidence that the district is going to go forward in a way that we can trust when we haven't seen that as of yet from those comments that we've been petitioning and working about for all these months. So I would like to
Madam Chair,
Yes.
like point of order. The witness has spoken many times, and actually she's referring to the lie that she told originally.
I think during public comment, we really need to respect the rules that we put together, which is to let the person speak for her 2 minutes and not to engage in back and forth debate about what she said, and to actually open our minds and listen.
Well, I agree with that, but I'd like to know also the rules that we have for public meeting guidelines for conduct. It's been changed apparently, because what's on the agenda tonight is totally different from what the chairman, and I think what you as vice chair put together before, during the springtime. And there's a particular section at the bottom that says that individuals offering public comment are not permitted to make personal attacks on any district employee, board member, or other testifier or member of the public.
I didn't hear her name a personal board member. I heard her
Well,
respond to the
I
board
realize that-
collective
That
statement.
probably hasn't happened yet, but it happened last month.
I think we should proceed with allowing public comment period. I request that.
So,
Uh,
just one moment, and I apologize, and I'll be back. In a business meeting held publicly, governed by Robert's Rules of Order, if a member of the board calls for point of order, it is a discussion between the member of the board that called for point of order and the board chair, until the board chair rules.
Thank you for the leader of our policy committee and the expert for Robert Rules. Then I would like to call one after that.
Okay. What I think is that what's been brought up today has not gotten to the range of being a personal attack.
Madam Chair, may I call a point of order?
Sure.
You don't have to ask. You
Okay.
can interrupt anytime.
What?
And that is, the board shall not respond to any comments or questions during public comment. That's all.
Okay. And that is true. So,
Sorry, Heather.
That's okay. Yeah, I just, we have been organizing and working, and the community has, hundreds, thousands, maybe comments have been along this line, and it hasn't changed. We're still looking for that same sort of confirmation from the district that we are against the types of comments that were made in that meeting. A motion of censure is appropriate, and we're still calling for that motion of censure, especially in light of what happened. Because comments that we are, I don't know if I'm not allowed to say who made the comments, but the comments that I'm referring to, they embolden the types of attacks that happened against our school children. And it is impossible to say that those things were not emboldened by those comments. This is the same district. And I'm glad that we're condemning those men that made the physical attacks, but these type of verbal attacks are equally painful, they're equally awful, and they harm the community in much the same way. So maybe a porta potty didn't get lit on fire, but the community was harmed, and the board should address that. So that's what I want to say about that. I also just want to thank the board for inviting Oregon Now last at the special session. That was really helpful to hear that presentation. And I'd like to follow up a bit with some comments that I've had some meetings with other parents in the district about the way in which dress code has harmed our children. I wanted to talk about that in the middle school at Alice Ott last year. We witnessed a lot of highly subjected enforcement. So this is notes that I took during a parent meeting last year, and I forwarded to the district back in April. We found that girls especially were getting in trouble for little holes in their jeans, whether or not they showed skin. So sometimes they have those little ripped, frayed jeans, and girls were being pulled out of class covered in duct tape. And if the duct tape didn't stick, then they would sit in an office all day and miss out on class time. So this was happening for many hours of lost class time, and specifically happening to girls. Boys that had holes in their jeans wasn't a problem. Likewise, we knew that some girls tried to test this out, and they swapped pairs of jeans. So one girl would get dress coded for the same pair of jeans that other girls would not get dress coded for. And it was clearly being used as this child that they were dress coding repeatedly for that pair of jeans that the other one wasn't getting dress coded for, was because that they were using it as a means to, that girl was a little louder than the other kids. It was more of a behavioral issue, but the pants were becoming a focal point in the battle between the teacher and that student. We also noticed a lot of wet class time being wasted by teachers that were highly vested in policing kids. One conversation I've been having this year with an 8th grader at Alice Ott, not my daughter, but one I see a lot, is that teachers are making it up as they go. So one thing that's happened this year is a girl's been dress coded for excessive makeup. Another girl has been dress coded for the 2-finger rule, which doesn't exist, so 2 fingers on the straps. Another girl has been dress coded for the 3-finger rule, so clearly just making it up as they go along. So those are things that have happened this year. And a major concern, I think, from the parents is the real sexualization that's happening to our girls. So men sitting in chairs in the hallway looking at little girls as they walk by and deciding whether or not their clothes are inappropriate is a major problem. It creates shame, and it creates a sense of just not safety for the kids. And a whole bunch of other things, boys being told to pull up their pants as they walk by, but they're not getting pulled from class. They're just being told, pull up your pants, if they're sagging too much or whatever that rule that they're following is. We also really subjective enforcement about how far the skirt or shorts have to be. So, different lengths torsos just result in different length things. The dress code also mentions a ban on electronics, which is clearly not enforced in any sort of way. So it's just kind of picking and choosing, we see. And we requested an immediate audit of the referrals and unofficial policing of students, which has not happened, to my awareness anyway. And we asked for the parent types of forums, parent, student, teacher forums last year, and we still haven't had any sort of follow-up with that. So I just want to underscore the need for proper training. Even if we're not adopting straight the Oregon Now model, our teachers deserve to and should know what the expectations are, and that they're not just making up rules as they go, like excessive makeup one day is now a rule, things like that. So I strongly support adopting the Oregon Now model in some version, either as is or maybe strengthening it, so that the relationship between student and teacher is less policing and more just teaching. Thank you.
Leah Middleton. Leah Middleton.
Hi, this is my first time ever addressing the board. What do you want me to say before you start my time?
Name and address.
Name and address?
Not address. You don't need to say your address.
No?
Address
Okay.
somewhere.
Just your name.
Do we have 2 minutes or 3?
3.
Okay, thanks. I'm Leah Middleton. I live near Flanders and 113th. I have 3 kids in the district at all 3 levels, Ventura Park, Floyd Light, and Fur Ridge. I find that the current dress code is really outdated and damaging. My kids are bright, curious, delightful individuals. All 3 of them have issues with the dress code, and it's caused a lot of frustration for our family. I'll quickly tell you about my youngest and my oldest, because they're very different cases. First, my son George has sensory processing disorder. He has a 504. He often feels very overwhelmed at school. He finds comfort in pulling his hoodie over his head and wearing a beanie. Over the course of many meetings, I was finally able to add that as an accommodation for him. But this causes a lot of confusion when substitute teachers and cafeteria staff and other students tell him that he's breaking the dress code. He gets reprimanded. He tries to explain that he has the accommodation. He's accused of back-talking, and he gets a referral. It's happened many times. So he's learned to just do without it, or to not argue. He shouldn't have to. The school environment is super overwhelming for anyone. If you've ever been in the cafeteria at an elementary school, it's enough to make you want to run screaming away, and the kids don't get to do that. So using clothing can actually provide comfort. I know that the Oregon Now dress code has something about that, about it being okay to wear beanies and have your hoodie up. My high schooler has been through many unique difficulties in her life, and showing up to school every day is a challenge, but she does it. She rises to it because she knows how important it is to get an education and graduate. But it doesn't help that at least a few days a week she's called out in front of classmates or pulled out of first period by her male teacher for dress code violations. Her and I have gone over the code together, excuse my voice. Over and over again, we both find it really confusing. My daughter has great style. Her clothing is one of the few areas of her life that she has some control over. This is really huge for her sense of self-identity as she navigates adolescence. The clothes and style she chooses isn't uncommon. It's the same thing I see everywhere I go in Portland, and everywhere in the media. My daughter is not the only one. Her female-identifying classmates are also constantly dress-coded. You know what this says? It's not working. Trying to get kids to not be kids is futile. The teachers and administration I've talked to say they're exhausted. It's not the clothing that's disruptive to classmates, it's the code itself, which is a time and energy suck for educators and for students like my daughter who are developmentally doing exactly what they should, expressing themselves and following trends. It's not that big of a deal. It's not up to the school to tell my child what that expression means. If a parent wants to impose dress codes on their children, that's fine with me. I don't care what my daughter wears. I do care that every day an adult male is assessing how much definition her nipples have under a shirt. My daughter has a body, get over it and get back to teaching her. If another student is distracted by my daughter's body, they can go sit in the hall. If I sound frustrated, it's because I am. They're not working, they're archaic. I believe their intent is to control, remove self-expression, body shame, and there's moral judgment involved. Uniforms will achieve the same thing. Kids will push against it. It will create more undue stress for families who are struggling anyway. I urge you to consider adopting the Oregon Now dress code. Train your educators to think about it differently, and let's show our students that we respect their culture and decision-making ability, and to end the daily battle over dress code violations.
Donnell Lynn. And just to make sure that everybody understands, there's a little box there with a green, a yellow, and a red light. Green means keep talking, yellow means your time's almost up, and red means your time's up, and blinking red means your time's really up.
Thank you.
Good.
I just want to stand in support of the dress code as it currently stands. I agree that there should be no shaming of students, and if that's happening, then that should be addressed and taken care of. But as the dress code stands, it is trying to help students to get through education, this education process, and prepare for the future. And in the future, they're going to face expectations at work and out in the real world. And to say that it's boys or men that are the problem, I think is a misused and misunderstood accusation, because not all men and not all boys are sexualizing women, and to place the blame completely on that is not a realistic accusation. I'm sort of stunned because I also work in the schools, and it just seems like it's not an appropriate thing to, it's not your house. It's just not your house. And so I wouldn't come to somebody else's house and say, I don't like your rules. I'm going to change the rules because I don't like them and I don't want to follow them. If you're in someone else's house, you abide by those rules, and we're in the district's house, and we abide by those rules, and they're for everybody, not just from one extreme or the other. It is to cover the broad base of our student body. And it's also for safety for our educators and paraeducators. And we're not trying to body shame. It's not, at least I know where I'm at, I have not seen that, where it's an accusation or rude or trying to call someone out. I just think that we need to look at it in more ways than just it's body shaming, where that's just one way of looking at it. There's also another way of, we're preparing our students for the future. And so that's what I want to encourage you to consider. I really support the dress code as it stands. Thank you.
Imogene Hui. Did I get that right, or how bad did I get it?
It's Imogen Huey.
Well, I just
fine.
messed it up.
Yeah,
all the
everyone
way.
does it. It's
Okay.
good.
Sorry.
IMAGEN.
It's hard.
So hi, my name's Imogen Huey. I'm a sophomore at David Douglas High School, and I'm here to talk about the dress code. So the dress code is mainly directed towards women. There's about 3, there's that picture that's all around the school, and there's about 3 that are directly towards men. And I think it shows sexism in the school, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. I have a lot of experience with the dress code. So one time I was walking down the hallway, and I was wearing a shirt that showed my belly button, which is not a sexual organ. It's not. And a teacher stopped me. It was about a 40-year-old man, and he said, "That's inappropriate, you need to go change." And I had a biology test, which I got 44 out of 45 on, so anyway, so he told me that, like, I have to go change, and I said, "I have a coat in my locker, can I go get it?" And he said, "You look provocative, and you need to go change." And it makes me feel so uncomfortable when a 40-year-old man tells me how to dress, when my father and mother say it's okay and that I look all right, they bought me these clothes. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Rape culture. Dress code promotes rape culture. 1 in 5 women are raped. 96% of women don't come up to it. And how it promotes how dress code promotes rape culture, I'm sorry. So when a lot of times in rape cases in court, men will say what the woman is wearing is the reason they raped the woman, that she deserved it because she was wearing jogging shorts and a tank top. I don't think any woman deserves that. Getting modifications. In the dress code, in the handbook, it says, "A student's appearance disturbs or distracts from the learning/teaching process. They will be required to make modifications." So my learning isn't as important as everyone else in the class because I need to change. It makes me feel unimportant and like I don't belong in this school. We're running out of time here. It also says in the dress code that, one second, I'm sorry, that due to changing fads and fashions, there may be changes throughout the year. If you go to stores like Charlotte Russe, Forever 21, stores like that that are directed towards women that most every girl I know shops at, you won't find full jeans without rips in it, which I also don't think mid-thigh is a sexual organ. Sexual organs are penis, vagina, boobs. Those are sexual organs that should not be showed at school, and I understand that, but I also don't think a belly button or my mid-thigh is a sexual organ. I strongly agree with the Oregon Now dress code. Thank you for your time.
Shayla?
Shala Franklin. I wanted to talk about the dress code. And before I do, this is the example of what we get dress coded for. I attended Alisal Middle School last year, and I have to say I never got dress coded, but I had so many friends that would get dress coded every day. Right now I attend Open School East, a school where I can get my education, where the staff and the principal are really worried about policing our bodies and just focus on policing our education. One example of a time a friend got dress coded when I was at Alisal would have to be when she wore a pair of pants with a hole in the pocket, and we were walking to class when she got stopped by this man. He wouldn't let her go to class. She stretched her shirt down to cover the hole and asked if she could go back to class. But the counselor came and she taped the spot with the hole. Later that day, they saw that she didn't have the tape on her leg, and she explained that it had fallen off because of the activity she was doing, and they didn't let her go back to class. She had to go to the office and call her mom and ask her to bring a different pair of pants, but her mom was at work and told her to go back to class. But the principal and the counselor made her stay in the office. While she was in there, she missed a lot of classwork, which isn't okay because it's not about having the staff and principal harp you about the little holes in your pants or how much makeup you put on your face. It's about learning. It's funny how the next day I wore the same exact pants, but the teachers and principals saw me in the pants, but I didn't get dress code for that. It shows that the pants is not about how they just wanted to call out a student for whatever reason. There was this one boy who wore a pair of pants with holes everywhere, and you could see his boxers. On top of that, that he was sagging, but the only thing they said to him was, pull your pants up, while he was walking in the hallway. After more girls were getting dress coded, my friend and I asked if we could speak to the vice principal, who now is the principal, about the issue about the dress code. He kind of hushed us. I only got to ask one question, which was, why are girls missing class time over little holes in their pants or for showing too much of your shoulder or chest? And he went on about saying that us girls, we are difficult and our style is changing over time, and how boys' styles are just staying the same. And so talking to him wasn't really a success, because all the message we got was how we were complicated. I understand the board is considering a new dress code model for the district. I strongly agree about it. Thank you.
Delilah Middleton?
Hello, I'm Delilah Middleton. I'm a junior at Fur Ridge campus, and I just wanted to real quick put my 2 cents in about the dress code. First things first, the argument that I am almost always met with when I bring up dress code with staff is that what I'm wearing, or what, you know, mostly females are wearing, is distracting to the learning environment, which I personally don't understand, because the only thing that's really disruptive to a learning community is when I get called out in class by a male teacher. It makes me feel so uncomfortable when this like grown man is telling me that like he can see like my nipples through my shirt because it's cold out, you know? Like I can't do anything about that. And they send me out and they make a really big deal out of it, and I miss learning time. It's really upsetting and really gets in the way of my schooling. The other thing is when, you know, I mostly see my female identifying classmates being dress coded. There's a lot of staff inconsistency and inconsistency in general, because I will see a like skinny, beautiful girl wearing like very like revealing clothes. Not like sexual, but you know, like you can see her tummy, you know, it's like against the dress code, and she won't always get called out for it, but I will see another student who, you know, is like overweight or isn't considered, you know, whatever, and they'll get called out. And I think that's honestly super disgusting that staff are really like picking and choosing, and it's not all staff, and I get that they have to abide by district rules, but it's just really upsetting for me to see like my classmates and myself like being called out for things that don't make sense to any of us. And I went to Portland Public last year, and I just really strongly endorse the Oregon Now dress code, because it's not sexualizing females. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Christina Blue Crow?
First, I'd like to come out in support of adopting the Oregon Now dress code. I have worked in 2 David Douglas schools for one of those for many, many years, Floyd Light Middle School, and more recently Ron Russell Middle School as well. I have seen teachers selectively apply the dress code as it currently exists. It is gender specific, and so if you have 2 sets of requirements on a binary gender system, which even the state of Oregon now has a legally recognized third gender. So if you have a binary gender system, not only is this a sexist dress code, it's also, it's not inclusive to the full gender spectrum that many people in our society are acknowledging exists now, that has existed throughout history. Jewish people have 6 genders. From my own culture, there's more than one gender. I feel that the Oregon Now dress code kind of nips some of that in the bud. It eliminates some of the gender specificity, which is going to reduce sexism and harassment of students. And I think that that's absolutely something that happens in the school. And I'm really frustrated to hear a member of the staff not believe the testimonies and the experiences of other people. And I would like to say that I'm not surprised that that person is not believing the experience of the students and the staff that are reporting on these problems of the dress code, because there is a standard at the highest level, our board district, to not believe the community about its struggles. So this ties in back, honestly, to the issues that we're already experiencing, where we saw racist graffiti, vandalism enacted in our schools, and that's because this school district is creating a safe space for people who have racist ideology, because there are members of the school board who are making racist remarks who still haven't apologized and still have not been censured by the board. So not only is there an individual perpetuating racism on the board and anti-immigrant type of rhetoric, then you also have a community of board members that's not holding that person accountable. So why would individuals in our community who are emboldened by racist thoughts, they would of course feel like that this is a place where they can vandalize and spread their message of racism, because we're already allowing people at the highest level of the board to terrorize our community.
Point of order.
Please do not interrupt me. Please do not interrupt me. Follow your own rules. If the board followed the rules that it set, we wouldn't be in the situation where someone violated the standards.
The witness testifies about racist comments, and there were no racist comments ever made. That's the lie that's been told around here. It's about time that people in the public knew that it's not right to come to the board and waste our time and tell us about the lies that have been told, and to repeat them and talk about racism when racism was not part of the discussion.
I made my own assessment by reading the minutes and watching the video that you made racist comments. So the video and the minutes do not lie about what they're...
You don't need a rule.
Our little posted rules back there do say that you cannot, that we don't allow attacks on board members.
I'm not attacking. I'm making a factual statement that those kinds of comments that have been made and haven't been apologized for, those were anti-immigrant sentiment, and that kind of sentiment, that kind of racist anti-immigrant sentiment, because we don't need a Constitution Week. People know what it takes to become a citizenship. That's already being taught in the school. A Constitution Week isn't going to keep my mother out of law.
We're actually required by law to have Constitution.
No, but the idea, I'm talking about the idea proposed by Bryce Anderson to highlight that would have potentially magnified people's legal or non-legal their immigration status. It's like there are people who've been in this country.
That was proposed by Stephanie in conjunction with Bryce. Mm-hmm. That wasn't all Bryce.
I feel like that. I feel like that it was so, but it's still with Bryce. But okay, thank you. Those kinds of ideologies. It's like poverty and discrimination is what kept my mother out of law from being able to take the citizenship test for years and years and years. And she was legal, but she didn't have her citizenship. And so those are not the kind of barriers that students are dealing with. And it's really tone deaf to have apologies for that kind of graffiti and to say that the district cares about those things when there have been really discriminating remarks made in violation of the school district's policies, and then that those remarks haven't been apologized for and they haven't been censured.
Point of order.
And the school district is not believing the community about the harm that has been caused.
Okay.
There has been an apology made. It was made on April the 13th, and if there wasn't so much noise in the audience at that time, then maybe the people could have heard it. Now, I'm not going to say any more, but this witness is unreliable. And
Okay, I would like to go back to my statement that we don't call people who come here the audience, and we don't call them witnesses. These are community members who've come here to speak. They have every right to do so, and it's our job as board members to listen. I would like a point of order that, again, and I'll read it, the board will not respond to any comments or questions during public comment. Would you rule on this, please?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Well, maybe we should, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a point regarding the rules then.
You don't even follow your own rules. How do you expect people who come to these meetings to
Madam
have
Chair, I'd like to
respect
make a
when you don't follow your own
Order
rules?
regarding the rules. Can you please silence the speaker?
I silence myself, buddy.
I'd like to know, I guess, which rules we're following, because as I mentioned earlier, we have a set of public meeting guidelines for conduct that was published and provided to each one of us, and I think it was backed by the sign-in sheet earlier in the spring that I understood that Mr. Riggs and you put together. That's different from what appears now on the actual agenda. So which one are we, it's never been told to me which one we were, or that was changed, or which one we were following. I assumed we were following this one until I saw the agenda tonight. So which rules are we following? And conspicuously, the last point on the previous guidelines says that there would be no personal attacks on any district employee, board member, other testifier, or member of the public. Okay, that's explicit, it's in there. It didn't appear on this one. So thank you, Ms. Stevens, for bringing that up, but again, I'm kind of confused as to which rules we're following here.
So what's on number 3 is a summarized version of this. So it's, as to not take up a whole bunch of space. Is this back there? Do we know? It's back there by the thing.
It wasn't earlier. It wasn't there, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, I would just like to reiterate Stephanie's concern around making sure that we are doing our due diligence and our responsibility to not interrupt public comment during public comment period. There is an item on the agenda for board member reports, at which point we may respond. So I would like to respect the community's time and proceed with public comment period as scheduled.
Okay. Is everybody satisfied with that? I am. Okay, I would like to move forward with public testimony. Are you?
So there is a big problem, I think, with board members and staff, district staff, in believing the school community when it expresses that it's been harmed. That is a huge, huge problem. Even now, my testimony is being interrupted because I'm reiterating that the community is continuing to be harmed, and then the person who made the harmful comments is remarking, no, my comments were not harmful. And that is a defensiveness that's really immature for a board district setting. And there's just, if we believe students, someone else was talking about the district, it being the district's house. But the reality is that the school district exists to provide a service to the community to educate children. So this house is all of our houses, all of our houses. If someone came into my house and they made an anti-immigrant remark while my immigrant mother out of law was sitting there, I would be like, get out of my house. You're not welcome here, because I do welcome anyone here who wants to be educated. And this is an educational community. And that means that we have to believe the harm of the students when they testify to it. We have to believe the harm of the community members when they testify to it. We have to believe the harm of the staff when they testify to it. And if one person sits indignant, refusing to acknowledge their responsibility in perpetuating harm, and refusing to apologize and then relinquish their power that they've abused by causing harm to their community, then the people around them need to hold them accountable, and that's not an attack, that's something you do out of love. Because if you want someone to be able to understand other people and have empathy for other people and grow and learn, then you need to teach them how to listen, believe other people when they tell you that they've been harmed and that you've done something to them. So I think the light isn't out, so I think that I'll just go ahead and relinquish.
Masa K.
Hi, my name is Masa Kane, and this is my first time attending a board meeting. I'm going to actually read from the phone. During my first meeting with my first grade teacher, she told me that she had my son was difficult. I was concerned that would mean that my son transitioned from kindergarten to first grade. As soon as the school year began, I started receiving correspondence by way of referral form and multiple phone calls and texts from his teacher that my son is having trouble in classroom. My son has always indicated he loves school and loves his friend at school. There are days where the teacher will literally call me 10 times a day. I have phone records to support this. Each time I call the school, I will leave my job and go pick up my son. My son socialized with many children in many activities outside of Gilbert Park. Prior to his attendance, I had never heard about behavioral concern related to my son, not from the caregiver who watches him while I work, not from his soccer coach, not from his taekwondo instructor, and not from our church, which is a multicultural church, and not from any of the parents in the community I am part of. I think much of the time the issue is that the teacher has with my son is cultural. There seems to be a lack of cultural competency at the school, and perhaps with David Douglas as a whole. My son is excited about school and learning, and I think that is being perceived as aggression. My son is not verbal and likes to move around. I think he's a kinesthetic learner, and is being perceived as a non-compliant when he's told to sit down. I think a 6 years old boy, and much of this violence that the teacher says is occurring is just play on Kasim not understanding boundaries surrounding play. I was very concerned about Kasim's behavior and his interaction with his teacher and classmates, so I went to observe in the classroom to understand what is happening. At times, I will plan these visits occasionally, and I will unannounced. I was a problem when I came unannounced and think that it's because my son was separated from the class at the time I arrived, and they did not want to tell me that. There are days where my son will spend much of his days isolated in room 6, often using an iPad to occupy his time with the behavioral specialist. When I was allowed into the classroom to observe, the teacher would walk first into my hands and insist I staple packets and do busy work if I was there. I observed other children of color being treated disparately by this teacher. She seemed to use the threat of referral as her only disciplinary tool, handing out referral often. I can speak more specifically about what I witnessed on request. Speaking with others, immigrants, Latinos, and Black parents, I learned that many of them had the same experience with their child in this classroom and at the school, especially in the district as a whole. On October 3rd, my child was suspended with saying that he choked another student. The other student is his best friend, and I called the father to check and was told that that never hurt, and the father did not want the teacher getting in the way of the friendship. I even had my pastor call to ensure my bias was not blinding me. The friend and his parents at the time they set a threat assessment on October 6th and not been interviewed by the school about the incident. Even though they suspended my son during the threat assessment, my 6-year-old son's behavior has a rap, strangled, stabbed. The assessment that was done on him was not for a 6-year-old. After asking the teacher to demonstrate in the threat assessment the physical movements that my son did, I learned my son's physical behavior was different from what I imagined. The teacher was trying to remove Kasim from the classroom, and he went over his friend and put his arm around from behind across his body. I believe my son sought out a person he felt safe while the teacher was chasing him. And because he didn't want to remove from the class again, I don't believe my son intended to harm his friend or to provoke Kasim, to provoke him. My son made to apologize for his behavior or outburst in front of the entire class. I feel this contributes to his feeling like an outcast, in addition to being separated from the class so frequently. I asked the principal if the kid have teased Kasim about the way he talks. They said that they don't know. In the 5th week that Kasim was in this class, I received 15 referrals. When I review my son's record, I find numerous discrepancies. There was a part of his record that said they had called me to pick my son after he did something and got him removed from the class, and that I refused. That did never occur. I drop everything whenever I'm at the school call. As a single parent working and going to school, it is always easy to do that. I will never refuse to come and get my son. This school have numerous referrals listed in my son's record, more than the 15 I have copies of, and the data and behaviors of this referral do not coincide with the referral I have in my possession. The record was listed to suspension. I'm just going to round on. When I look at the district data of 2006, I see that 11% of the district are black children through the make of 22% of the suspension and expulsion. There are 0 black teachers in the district and only 1 Latino, even though Latino make up over 20% of the student body. There seems to be lack of cultural competency from the administration and many of the staff. When I advocate for my child, I felt as though the teacher and administrator treated me as though my concerns weren't relevant, and they did not matter. I felt like they questioned my intelligence and disregarded my perception of the culture in the school. I have so many families that I've talked to that are minority also that are going through this. I would like the board to launch an investigation and see how our kids are suffering. They're missing class. Most of the days they're sent in the behavioral room. When I walk down the hallway, I can see black and minority kids just out of the class. When I raise concern, then my son will get more referrals. I work with retired teachers, and they can also testify about how many calls I get for the day as a cosmetologist when I'm doing their hair or doing their nails. I really need your help. I have proofs, and I have phone records, everything to back up my claim. I'll have to stop right now. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay. Now we're on to superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So 3 quick, actually, my report's going to be very short tonight because we have a number of different presentations we discussed earlier. But I do want to focus in on 3 specific items. Number 1 is wanted to share that this is the first official evening of our board meeting being streamed. And I say official because the last 3 or 4 board meetings, it has occurred. We've been beta, we've been in test, but we actually went public with this. We published it, and so I wanted to thank Derek and his team and Josh and the board for asking and requesting and making this happen. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I wanted to share that we are putting together an enrollment report. In next board meeting, you will get a copy of this along with the report. But I did want to share realistically where we're at, and just one quick point that unfortunately right now we are down a total of 194 students district-wide. So again, just to clarify, I wanted to share that information. We will provide the complete report to you. Overall, there's 192 less at elementary. Middle school's up by 32 and high school's down by 34. And the high school down by 34 would be technically more of a flat number because that kind of gives and takes, but when you look at 192 at elementary, that's very significant. So again, you can expect to see this report at the next board meeting and have a full report on it, but I just wanted to share because we take the official account the first day of school in October, which was October 2nd. And then the last thing I wanted to share, and it's a little bit, I don't know if it's untimely or not, but I do want to share it because it was mentioned many times this evening about the unfortunate, worse than unfortunate, the racist graffiti that occurred at our schools and the hate that was distributed. But I did want to share 2 things. I wanted to, 1, thank our community that came together after that, thank our community that came together to talk about fundraising and how to make our schools whole again. At all the schools, individuals asked how they could help, even if there wasn't significant damage like the pole. So that's number one. I wanted to just reach out to our community and thank them for what they did. And number two, I wanted to thank our police, because I can report that, and I don't have details specific, but I can report that there were 2 arrests made based on the investigation, based on our security cameras where there was a snapshot taken, and based on, again, community members who basically called in, community members who were upset and saw those photos and actually called in and gave leads to our police. So I do know at this point there are 2 arrests that have been made. So with that, I just wanted to quickly report, share with our community, and once we have more details, there will be a full release of information through our communications department about what we know. That's all I have this evening.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the financial report, and Pat's out tonight, so the financial report's a written report, and it's available on the website. I'm not going to read it. It's really long and kind of boring, probably, for everybody in the audience. So the next item is consent agenda. So can I get a motion?
The consent agenda.
Thank you.
I second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, pass. You oppose? Okay. Did you get that, Lori? Okay. And the original agenda, we had number 7, staffing report, and number 8, dress code presentation. We're going to flip those, and we're going to go ahead with the dress code presentation by the DDSD administrators group.
Yeah, and before they come up, just a quick introduction. And Andy, I'm going to hand it over to Andy here in a minute, just to remind the board, I believe 2 board meetings ago, we had a community member, she happens to be in the audience this evening, who came and basically testified around dress code, asked the boards to consider, look into, investigate, review, all of those, I think. With that said, that board meeting, the board did say, hey, let's hold a special meeting, and during that special meeting, we will get a presentation on the dress code. With that occurred, we started the process of putting together a presentation from our district administrative team just to share what our dress code is, how it's implemented, what happens day to day in our schools as information. Once that occurred, we also had the opportunity for Oregon Now to come present to our board. We took that opportunity and they came and presented, at which point afterwards there was some dialogue and discussion, and basically what came out of that is more information. Can we have more information? Which many testimony tonight. I'd like to thank people for sharing information, but also we're going to get some information for our administrative team. And then just a reminder for everyone that our community survey, our parent and guardian survey that will be going out into this month, next month, also has questions around dress code as well, just to gather information for the board as requested. So with that said, I want to take the opportunity to introduce Mr. Long. He is going to be reviewing just some brief information on the dress code, a little bit of a history, where it exists, how it came about, just for information purposes. And after that, he's going to get the opportunity and privilege to introduce our principals who are here this evening and share kind of what information they're going to share. Thanks.
Well, good evening. Whoa, it's a little close, maybe. You have at your seats a pamphlet that I believe Superintendent Richardson had passed out to you. But at this time, I want to take a few minutes tonight to talk about 2 things. The first thing is where our dress code lives, and also how our dress code came about. And then what I'll do, as Superintendent Richardson said, is we'll hand it over to a couple of our administrators at the elementary level to start and see and discuss how our dress code's carried out on a day-to-day basis with our 10,410 students as of today. So hopefully this will guide some understanding in what we do, why we do it in terms of dress code, choices and options that are given to students, and so forth. So, okay, first off, where the dress code lives. Every student in David Douglas receives our Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, and the dress code lives on page 6 of that handbook. A copy of our dress code is in the first page of this packet that you have. And that is the Students' Rights and Responsibilities Handbook is included in our kids' planners at the middle school, high school. This dress code is universal. So what I mean by universal is that it's all David Douglas schools follow that code. Now, aside from the universal dress code in the Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, each school communicates that a little bit differently, and that's what you'll see in your pamphlet. Behind the first page is how each middle school communicates the dress code. So you'll see Alisat's, you'll see the next page, you'll see Floyd Lights, and then as you open up, you'll see the next 2 pages is Ron Russell's dress code, or the communication out of the dress code. Finally, if you look through the next few pages, you'll see the explanation of, I think it's page 25, 26, 27 of the pamphlet, and those are from David Douglas High School in their student handbook. Okay, the second thing before we kick off to our administrators is how our current dress code that has been brought up this evening and will be discussed, how it came about. During the 2008-2009 bargaining, our Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook that I previously mentioned was created. And in your pamphlet, you'll see that on the very last page, you'll see the wording that's referenced to that. During the bargaining process, this code was adopted, and you'll see on the last page of the pamphlet are just the names of the folks that were involved in that back in 2009. In creating the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook. So, with that said, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis in our schools? How is it carried out? Now, as Superintendent Richardson said, I have the privilege of inviting a few of our school administrators to come up and speak about that. And first off, I'd like to introduce Ms. Barker, who is our principal of Cherry Park Elementary, and Mr. Bassett, who is principal at Gilbert Heights. These are 2 of our elementary schools.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. Great to see you all, and thanks for inviting us to talk about dress code. For those of you who don't know, I've been in the district this is my 27th year, 14 as a principal. And I'm also a parent. I have a graduate and a sophomore at David Douglas High School. And so we were asked the questions that Shane and I will go through. The first one is, how is the dress code taught to students and families? As Mr. Long mentioned, Students' Rights and Responsibility Handbook is sent home. We do send home updates and newsletters, as well as general overview in our positive behavior support parades and just going over the rules with our students.
Yes, and as Andy mentioned, it's also in the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook. We were asked about how the dress code is monitored, and some people have spoken about enforcement or implementation, but we really monitor is what we do. First of all, teachers remind students about the dress code rules. If the student does not comply or does not have the means to comply, the administrator, counselor, health assistant, or the secretary is called to assist the student, just some caring adult. In most cases, students stay in class until someone is available to provide options for them. I say in most cases because sometimes it's like a student's pants are actually torn as a result of a PE activity or something that happened on the playground, and they just need to be someplace until we can get something for them to wear. The administrator, counselor, health assistant, or secretary, some caring adult, provides options to the student for addressing the dress code violation. We usually call the parent first to provide the option of them providing clothes. And if they can't come or the parent does not answer, we provide options for the student.
Yep. So at all elementary schools, we do have all of us have clothes closets. And I know, just speaking from the one that we have at Cherry Park, if the parent is working or we can't get a hold of them, and it's necessary that the child does change, then we provide them with lots of different options. If they split their pants, we could say, you know, would you like to wear a skirt or a pair of sweatpants or a pair of jeans? There's lots of different options there. I think the most important thing about this whole issue is to get to the why, and it's important that we always keep the child's dignity and the family's dignity at the forefront. And so that's why we really want, Shane and I wanted to emphasize that it's just not a random person that might notice the child or enforcing the child to help them change. It's somebody that they feel comfortable with. And so it's more of a coaching support role as opposed to a punitive role. I know that we don't write referrals for dress code violations. There usually is something, a different reason why a child may need to change. We provide education, we provide resources, and we try to get to the why. If a student or parent mentions that perhaps they don't have the means to have appropriate clothing, maybe they've had a growth spurt, then we say, why don't you come on in and in a private moment, can you load up a bag of clothes from our clothes closet? If it's laundry detergent, we make sure that they get laundry detergent. But the process is equitable and caring and very dignified.
The next question we were asked was, what are the biggest dress code infractions? So one of the ones that has happened at Gilbert Heights is clothes with inappropriate slogans, advertising, or representations. Most of the times it's totally unintentional. In fact, many times some of our families who are new to the country or don't speak English, they may have clothes that they don't realize what the meaning is of the words that are there. We've had a couple of situations like that, but like I said, mostly unintentional. Probably the other dress code issue that we've had are hats and hoods, specifically for kids who just got haircuts or kids who have experienced trauma or kids who just aren't feeling well that day. I think generally at the elementary level we make a lot of exceptions for that because we understand the needs of kids in those situations.
And then probably another, and I think I would get dress coded for this because I love flip-flops. Sorry, Frida. But in my 14 years of being a principal, 27 as an educator, no one's gotten hurt because they wore flip-flops. So that's just my own opinion. But and then occasionally, if there's a spaghetti strap or a midriff showing, but mostly it's because a garment rips or not necessarily that expression argument.
Are we on to this part?
Pros and cons?
Yeah, okay, great. So we were asked to also consider pros and cons of the dress code. And I think this was just a really objective process for us to just kind of look through the code as it is and to think about some of the pros and cons from maybe an administrator's point of view. So some of the statements in the current code are subjective and hard to enforce. From an administrator's point of view, some of the words like revealing or excessively tight were hard for us to think about in terms of a definite hard rule. There's no clear enforcement protocol in the written code, so everyone probably does it a little differently as a result. As we checked in with our colleagues, we found small differences in how we monitor dress code. There is not a formal training currently for staff district-wide in implementation and enforcement or monitoring of the dress code, and so there may be differences in how people apply it. And then one is kind of a pro and a con, that some of the rules may be based in traditional notions of respect or modesty. And this is really a pro or con depending on the values of the implementer and who's sort of, implementing the code.
And I just want to reiterate, in my opinion, it is, we need to have equality in each of our buildings, so that depending on if you go to Shane's, you're going to be treated the same as if you come to Cherry Park. And we do that through training and really crystal clear expectations, and never assuming somebody knows how to enforce whatever it would be. And so I think that the biggest con, if you will, is that we have not had that formal training, and we have not had that that discussion of, well, how do you enforce a dress code? What does that look like at your school? And so that we can be more on the same page as principals, and then that trickles down to our staff. I think that that's the biggest con of our current system. Some of the pros of is that it's consistent district-wide, and it's for the whole district. It prepares students for professional workplace expectations. It provides a standard that allows some cultures to feel more comfortable in our setting. And at the elementary level, we really haven't had a huge problem. And so it hasn't been a big issue.
Okay, great. Some of the barriers to implementation. We were asked to speak about barriers to implementation. We've already spoken about some of them. But one is that it's sometimes uncomfortable, and I've talked to a few staff members, it's sometimes uncomfortable for staff to make judgments about words like adequate, appropriate, revealing, excessively tight, particularly when it's students of the opposite gender. And that kind of goes both ways, that perhaps it's uncomfortable in both directions. At some schools that we've just heard of, there have been a few situations where parents did not agree with the dress code and have pushed back on it. In those cases, at least at the elementary level, from what we heard of, administrators and parents have just agreed to disagree. We can't speak for all of the schools, but we have our own experience to draw from.
Yep. And I haven't experienced pushback. I think when you have a relationship with your parents, and you have a relationship with the child, and you're able to work as a team, that you can work out and learn from each other. So I really haven't had, I can't think of any pushback around this issue at my 3 different buildings.
Yeah. And at Gilbert Heights, it just really hasn't been that much of an issue in the 3 years that I've been there. I think I've addressed dress code maybe 3 times since I've been there. Really for me, oh my gosh, there are so many other things that kids need, and especially in the academic realm, that maybe I'm oblivious, but I'm just not focused on it.
Yeah, same. We're there to teach kids and love them and care for them and make them feel like they're loved and wanted and taken care of, and taking care of the whole kiddo. So this really has not been an issue at the elementary level. Thank you.
Can we, are we? Can we ask questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kate,
We have questions. Well, before I ask questions, will we be hearing from additional administrators? Will there be a second panel? Or?
Yes, so we have 2 middle school and 2 high school.
Got it.
As well.
Okay, I'd actually like to hold my questions till the end.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
You just can't miss. You just can't
Bye. Thank you.
Wait. So you said that it hasn't been an issue. We're last board meeting, we had a presentation from an organization that's very much supportive of a change in our code, as well as wherever else they're asked to present their code. Anyway, would you say that, is there anything that, I don't know how familiar you are with the proposed changes as, and I don't want to ask you if you're familiar, but just tell me, do you think that there would be anything that would need to be changed similar to what might be proposed if you've read it, that we need to adopt?
I came to the presentation 2 weeks ago, and that was my first introduction to the new proposed code. And I just, as far as right here, right now, being able to pick apart what ours versus the proposed code, I wouldn't feel like I was educated enough to be able to make an informed decision right here on the spot. I think, as I mentioned, I really feel that we do need to look at our dress code, and we do need to think about how we are implementing our dress code, and how we are training our staff and our parents and our kids on how are we looking at it together to see what's going to fit with our community. I do feel strongly that we should have a dress code, and that we do need to look at different options, but we still need to have a dress code that we all follow, that our students follow. So, but as far as specifics, I don't feel like I can do that with.
Okay, and I guess I'm just kind of curious if maybe a change as significant as what is perhaps proposed, if it might actually become a distraction. Shane, I'm sorry, I don't recall your last name. Excuse me.
Bassett.
But anyway, you pointed out that you have so many other things that you're dealing with and things of larger importance. And I'm just curious if maybe this is going to overshadow things that you perceive to be more important. There was big changes.
I don't think so. At our level, at the elementary level at least, I just feel like it's important that we care for our kids in as many ways as we can. And maybe I'm avoiding the question altogether, but really that's what I'm about, and I feel like that's what our district should be about. There's a couple of things that come to mind, though, in response to your question, and that is, that I do think that the dress code should be looked at and evaluated just like everything that we do. We have our, our equity policy, and we need to use that lens on everything that we do. And our administration is telling us to do that in our schools and to look at everything. And so I think some of those equity essentials that we have that our district administration has been giving to us ask some really good questions, like who's at the table. And so, if we're going to be looking at dress code, we should look around and say who's at the table. We should have a really good rationale for whatever code that does come about. We should definitely make sure that nobody's harmed, for sure, and that it's objective and easy to monitor, because like I said, there are so many other priorities that I don't want to be caught up in, and I'm just speaking personally at this point. I don't want to be caught up in measuring or observing or, doing too much of that. It's got to be really clear so that it can be monitored quickly and efficiently, so we can get on the business of caring for kids.
So I've changed my mind. I do want to say one thing, which is that I have two twins, and they go to Menlo Park, and so they are elementary kids. And I said this, I mentioned it last time, but many of you weren't here, which is, the first week of school, we had 100-degree weather, and everything was burning in the gorge, and my daughter wanted to wear her favorite outfit to school, but it happened to have spaghetti straps, and she didn't understand why she couldn't wear that to school when it was going to be 100 degrees and there's no air conditioning. And I just kind of went, that's the rules. And then my son really loves hoodies, and he gets cold and wants to wear them and doesn't understand why he can't wear his hoodie. So they're not here to testify, and I asked them if they wanted to, but they were too scared. So I just want to bring the elementary students into the room and let you know that some of the students are feeling like, it's keeping them from comfort. More than expression at the elementary level, comfort.
Anybody else? ready for the
Thank you, guys.
next group.
All right, thank you. We'll now have one of our vice principals, that is Miss Spears or Miss Tay from Alisat, and principal of Floyd Light, that is Mr. Pease. Middle schools.
Good evening. I am LaShante Spears. I go by Miss Tay. Right now I'm at middle school, I'm Miss Spears. I've been in the district for 15 years, and this is my first year at Alisat.
Hello, I'm Doug Pease. I'm the principal at Floyd Light. Very happy to be here, and thank you for your time and for your attention and audience. We're going to be probably, or I am, Ms. Tay probably won't. I will be a little bit less brief and less eloquent probably than the two previous. They did a great job. The first thing I'd like to say is we are, all of our middle schools are really concentrating on creating a welcoming environment. I know we are at Floyd Light especially. One thing we do with our dress code, and the reason I mention that is we do teach it in our PBIS lessons as Kate mentioned. So that's how we start it. And then what we do is we periodically reteach those key points. We were asked about the biggest infractions. And the biggest infractions we see at the middle school level is the holes in the jeans, the midriff showing, hats and hoods, pajamas being worn to school, and bandanas. Those are the biggest infractions.
We were also asked, what does the process look like? So when we have students arrive that are not in the district-wide dress code, what does that look like when we have to address that? Right now, I generally, and I'm big on creating relationships with students, so generally I don't get a lot of pushback at all. So I normally ask a student if they are wearing a hood, for example, will you please pull down your hood while you are in school? And students, I'm telling you, I'm right there in the start of a school day. I'm just right there watching kids come in just to say hello. It's not that I'm there to see who can I get today. It's simply to say hello to our kids. And if I see a kid with the hat on, I will ask them to remove their hat. And generally, it's always, yes, Ms. Spears, yes, Ms. Spears. When students choose not to comply, students are often sent to the office, and during that time, if I have a kid who needs to change, I just take them to the clothes closet to pick out something. I generally will first ask the student, do you have something with you that you can change into? And our kids, they carry around all kinds of stuff. So sometimes our kids do have items that they can change into. If not, they are given something from the clothes closet, and I let the kid pick it out from the clothes closet because I do want them to be comfortable in whatever their selection is.
We were asked if it was an equitable process. We certainly don't target any gender group, but I do want to echo what Kate has said, is that we're not haven't gotten formal education on how to enforce it. So there is some variety amongst our staff.
In addition, and I'm just going to go back to one thing part of the process, is to date we have no referrals for dress code. And I know it's still very early in the year, but I did want to make sure that I said something about that. We have bought several items to add to our clothes closet and just to have things there at the school. I generally don't ask the student to bring the item back because it could be that the student really needed the item. And so on what I love is Black Friday, I go out and I buy lots of leggings. And our girls wear leggings all the time, so they're able to go ahead and keep those things and add to their wardrobe. We also have sort of improvised in letting students know if they are showing midriff, I will ask the student, hey, you got something just to tie around your waist? And generally they will have a coat or a hoodie or some sort that they can tie around their waist just to take care of the infraction.
I'd just like to add, excuse me, every once in a while, a student will have an issue. I think Kate mentioned this, or maybe Shane, and I will write them a note saying they have a hair issue. I mean, we had a medical issue last year, and brought around the note and respectfully showed the note that they could wear the hat. So that does happen. Oh, that's what I thought he was talking to me. Sorry. Were you doing the pros and cons? Okay. I'm done.
Yes. In addition, we were asked to talk about a little bit the pros and cons of dress code in our building. I do believe that one of the pros are ensuring that our students are preparing for the next steps, what it looks like to show up for an interview. To properly show up for an interview, moving on to a workplace setting, and also just next steps in life. I would say that another one of our pros, sorry, I lost my spot. I'm going to jump to cons. One of our cons are currently we have kids, and Doug could speak to this a little bit more. We have had kids miss class at Floyd Light due to dress code. This year at Alisade, we don't have any kids who have missed class because of dress code, but I'm going to go to Doug so he can address that.
Sure, we try to minimize that, but sometimes teachers will send students up to the office to take care of it. We try and take care of it as quickly as possible, and if we can't, we send them back to class with a note. That's what we currently do. So that's when I say they miss a little bit of class time, that's what it is. We were asked about barriers. One major barrier, and this is in all aspects of middle school, is they want to know why about everything. And so as it's written right now, there's not a lot of whys in there. So I do a lot of one-on-one explaining why we have some parts of the dress code. So that's something that I would like to see addressed. Just some of the organizations, it says changes in language is the other question we had, and I want to echo what Shane and Kate said. I think we should review how we have it and have it be something with a mix of like what is allowed and what's not allowed, and currently it's not that way. And so the main thing I want to say, just in general, is that we really care about our kids. We care about every single one of them. I know at Floyd Light, and I know they have similar sayings, but at Floyd Light we have a saying that's all over, that all of our kids are all of ours. And we really have that attitude staff-wise. Whatever the board decides to do on our dress code, we'll make sure we're educating our students and that we're making them have a welcoming environment.
I completely agree with that. It's just ensuring that we're putting our kids first. We don't want kids out of class due to dress code. We want to support, and if there is something where families are falling short in any area, we want to be able to support as well, but we want to keep education as our priority for our students.
Thank you.
Yes, questions. Thank you very much for your information. I have a couple questions. If you're doing the average check for dress code and you take an individual to the clothes closet and have them change and go back to class, how much time on average does that take per incident?
I would say anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. It goes pretty fast. And again, that's if a student is on board with going ahead to change.
And most students are on board?
From what I found, yes.
Okay. 2 to 3 minutes to go to the clothes closet, select an item, go to the bathroom, change to the item, go back to the classroom.
Well, the other thing to consider is normally kids have things with them. So if a girl, boy, whoever has something in their bag, I'll just change on my way, Miss Spears. So they are literally walking down the hall and putting a shirt over whatever the dress code issue may be.
Okay. And on an average day, how many of those stops do you make?
And I'm going back to this year. It has not been a whole lot. I want to say that I've dealt with dress code 2 times this year so far.
So if every staff member in your building has an average of 2 stops per day over the year, that's a significant amount of time that is being spent.
Are you saying each staff member?
If each, I'm assuming you're not the only one in the building that does those stops.
I am not, but I would say that not each staff member has addressed dress code 2 to 3 times this year.
She's not
Okay.
saying per day, she's saying.
I'm saying per day. What I've dealt with so far this year myself has been about
Okay.
2, but it has not been reported to me that staff had addressed students for dress code at least 2 to 3 times, not at all.
Okay.
I think that's a large number.
Okay. And the clothes closet, how much are you spending for the school to have that clothes closet per year?
Much of our items are donated, but we do spend money also on leggings. Sometimes we take it out of petty cash, and sometimes we take it out of our back wallets. So
How much money
I would say about $200.
per year
I
Yes.
spend about 50 a year.
for the for your individual child's clothes closet, or
No, for the schools.
for the schools?
Yeah, I take it in, I meet the principal.
For each school?
Oh, heck no.
Okay.
Be a little more generous there, Kyle.
I choose a school at random.
Donate.
It's generally an elementary school because they have more of a need for smaller child pants.
Smaller child. Okay.
Accidents.
Thank you.
I have a question, actually. So one of the things that we talked about briefly, and I agree with Kyle Riggs, who's talking to somebody else. Attention, please. I agreed with you that we need to begin with why we need a dress code, right? If we decide why we need it, then things can follow after that. And I'm wondering, since we don't have the why explicit, when you have a girl, maybe that may be showing skin in a way that our dress code doesn't allow, what do you tell her about the why?
I go back to the dress code. So I go back to the district-wide dress code that we've made available to every one of our students, and I just say you're not in dress code. I don't make it so much about the student. It's really about the policy that I enforce.
And I was particularly asking you.
Yeah.
Because you were the one that brought it up.
Right, I did. That one is hard, and I often will defer. I'll just say, I will say to our counselors who are both females, I'll usually defer to them and ask them to talk to them. Okay, thank you.
Good.
But, so that's really, I'm not exactly sure on what they say the why on that one is. It's a tough one.
Thank you. I heard you mention that it's not the intention of the policy or of your school to target a certain gender when you enforce the dress code. Yet the clothes closet has predominantly leggings.
Well, a high number of our infractions are holes in the jeans. And so generally I will just have girls or boys, whoever, put the leggings underneath their pants.
Okay, so
I'm sorry.
No, go
That's what we normally buy, but we have lots of other sweats and jeans and all kinds of things. But the leggings tend to be more personal products, so we don't close closet those. They're just new that we have.
Like long johns, basically.
Yeah, that.
Okay, so the clothes closet has an equal amount of clothes for girls and boys, or all genders, or would you say it's heavily weighted towards female identified clothing traditionally?
I would say it's pretty equal.
It's pretty equal?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anybody else?
All right, middle school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up we'll bring our high school principal from David Douglas, Mr. Byer. Also coming up, Vice Principal Mr. Talley.
Good evening. Sorry we were a little bit late tonight. We are a bit short administratively and security-wise, and so we needed to quickly run by earlier to a volleyball game and then to a soccer game where we didn't have supervision. And so we're on call. We have our radios, and so if we have to run out of here, you'll know why. But and just so you know, the volleyball girls won tonight, and so I believe that means play-in for us. And then the boys, the last time I saw, we were up 4-0 in the second half, and I believe that's going to be a playoff for us. We'll find that out tomorrow morning. So, go Scots!
Go Scots!
So many of the things that you've heard tonight, and it was kind of nice for us to hear from elementary and middle as well. We weren't able to get together with them and coordinate the presentation. Largely just, it's hard to get everybody together. So it was nice to hear them present ahead of time because there are some consistencies in terms of throughout our district. And in particular, I think you'll hear tonight, I'll probably repeat it again, is just the idea of preparing kids for their future, and that's really important to us. But I wanted to kind of build a little bit of a case for you tonight, and so I approached this a little bit differently. And so I've been the principal at the high school for the last 10 years, and I wanted to just kind of point out that, in that time we have really improved our performance year after year. In fact, in the last few years, we've been able to meet or exceed 9,000 college credits for our students, which is a significant milestone. In fact, pretty much in the East County and a lot of the state is in the top 4 or 5 schools for that, and so we're very proud of that. The other thing is our graduation rate continues to increase year in and year out. And we also, I think next board meeting, Superintendent Richardson was talking about, you guys will be looking at our report card. And I want you to note that over the last 4 years, certainly we've seen, a significant growth with graduation. And also within our, within some of our ethnic groups, we have worked very hard at closing the gap. And whereas our overall graduation rate is not where we want it to be, yet we're working extremely hard to get there. And so how does that happen? Well, as a staff at the high school, we are extremely goal-oriented. And so we set goals on a 3-year increment, and basically it is a graduation rate goal, and then we set our policies and programs out to how we're going to achieve those goals. Some of the things we address, we've built a very strong academic program for our students to prepare them for the next steps. We feel like if a student wants to go to a 4-year university or a 2-year community college, we have got an absolutely wonderful program set up for them to do that. We continue to build CTE opportunities for our students. And these opportunities, as well as the academic opportunities for 4-year, the CTE, our goal is to give a student a clear path to the next steps in their lives after they get out of high school. Along with that, with Measure 98, we'll continue to build our CTE programs and give our students opportunities to achieve college credit. And I would love to come back at some point and talk to you about Measure 98 and the goals that we have for our school, because I'm telling you, we're going to knock it out of the park. The other thing is that we are building systems to catch kids that are falling behind. And in a large school, it's pretty easy to roll under the radar, and we've worked extremely hard to look at on-track data and try to catch kids that are falling through the cracks and build supports to not only get the kids back on track, but to keep them on track. The other thing we have is a very high-quality teaching staff, and just staff overall, but a very high-quality teaching staff. You can wander, and I invite you to the high school anytime that you want. And we can pop into classrooms. You will see high-quality instruction going on there. The other thing that I will tell you about our staff is they are highly relational. In fact, if I was to say the strength of David Douglas High School, it is about building relationships, and our staff is wonderful at doing that. We have high behavioral expectations for our students. We want to create a business-like atmosphere. We feel that school is very serious business. We're charged with preparing the children in this community for their future, and that's a big responsibility. And so we do the best that we can to prepare them for their future by building and having high expectations. Many of our classrooms, in fact, I walked through our band room the other day, and I've seen this now in the last couple of days in 2 classrooms. There is there is a definition of excellence by Aristotle that I see from now and then. And again, I saw it in the band room, and I just love it. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. And so when we look at what we do at the high school, we are trying to build excellence, and part of that really are high academic standards and high behavioral standards, and that has to do with dress code as well. We want to build a culture in which all of our students feel that they are being prepared for a future, and that is very, very important to us. We're proud of that expectation. And I, as principal, again, I've been principal for 10 years, I'm very proud of the traditions that we have there, and we do the best we can to include all of our students and work very hard to make sure that they all get equal opportunity. The other thing just about dress code, besides building that culture of success, is it is about safety. When you have a school of 3,000 teenagers, things happen. And when you have as large a campus that we have, there are a lot of ways to get on campus and off campus. And so it's very important to know who your students are. And one of the things that we have is a rule, and there's a few other reasons, but no hats and hoods. And I will tell you, over the years, we have got a lot of students who have come onto our campus that we've been able to identify right away because they're wearing a hat or a hood. And so safety from that standpoint of view. Also, just if you have labs or in a science class, if you're in a shop class, things like that, appropriate dress is very important. And I think one of the things too is just in our hallways. You have 3,000 students let loose when the bell is rung, it gets quite crowded, and so sometimes flip-flops may not always be good, Kate, in that scenario. What we hear from folks. First of all, I firmly believe that the majority of our high school staff supports our dress code. Our business partners certainly do. We continually hear from businesses that we partner with in the community and just around the Portland community of how well our students look and act, both when the business partners come to our school and when we go to their businesses. That's important to us. Former students. I've had on occasion, well, I talked to a lot of former students, and in fact, I remember one that was actually interviewing for a teaching job, and afterwards we were just chatting, and he said, you know, I really did not like the rules that we had in place when I was here, but now that I've graduated and I've gone through college, I really understand what you were trying to accomplish with us, and I really appreciate it. I've heard that quite a few times. A couple of other things. I had a principal for the day, which we do every year, and took them to our lunch, and we were just watching students, which is one of the best parts of my day, and just to go and watch kids be kids. And about halfway through the lunch, he said, how do you do this? How do you do this? So how do we do what? Your kids talk to each other. They talk to each other. And I said, well, we don't have cell phones and we don't allow electronic devices. That's part of education too, in my mind. When you have students that are actually so much now, if you ride public transit or anything like that, people tune out from each other. There's no interaction anymore. And so I think it's a really important part of our development and education to have students that are interacting with each other. And that's extremely important in my mind as well. We just went through the accreditation process last year, which is basically a licensing process that you do every 6 years. It involves a team of administrators and business people coming in from all around the state to look at your school. When they were working together at the end of the day, I overheard them say, and then they said to us, that they have not marked a high school as high a rating as ours. This is the leader in the 20 years that he's done this business. And a lot of what he said, and Kyle, you're nodding because you saw it, a lot of what he said is the students and the atmosphere that is at David Douglas High School is unprecedented. And I'm very proud of that. I think students, for the most part, understand the need for a dress code. They may not always agree with it, but that's, you know, we all have those kind of boundaries. I have them myself. Ken's always on me about something. But we all have those kind of boundaries that in our lives, and we learn from those, and it develops character over time. I do think that there's a need to examine. There always is some things about our dress code, and I'm sorry, Anwar, the other day you guys met, and I really want to, you know, we had Kogel over there in an administrative meeting, and you guys were talking about dress code, and I know a couple of things. Holy jeans, man. I know that's one thing that you guys talk about, and I think the other thing is, and this is something that we continually work on. We're not perfect at it, and I got to tell you that, and that's consistent enforcement. And when you have we have 170 certified teachers and over 200 adults in the building, and building that consistency is a challenge. And you know, we've messed up at times. There's no doubt about that. And one of the things that this came from the students, and I'm going to compliment Anwar on this and the students that were working on this. You know, we typically get our staff together every year and go through a list of items that we want to make sure and remind them of. And we've brought a lot of new staff members on over the last 2 or 3 years, and we've been remiss about going back and walking our staff methodically through our dress code. And that has caused problems with our students, and that's not fair to them. And so we've got to go back and work with our staff to make sure that we are on board and we are all consistent with how we are doing things. And so there are some issues that definitely we need to work on. Mr. Talley is here today to talk a little bit about how we implement and follow the dress code.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So one of the things that we do to roll out our dress code at the beginning of the year, sometime about the third week or so, the students receive their student planners. And in the student planners, if you've seen them before, it has all the rules, regulations, lots of information there for kids to use, a daily planner and whatnot. So prior to that is usually about 2 weeks or so. And so what we do as a staff and as administrators and security and deans, we remind students of dress code policies and attendance policies and the rest of our policies. And so we have conversations with kids. As you've heard several times tonight, it's about relationships and about building relationships with kids and trying to be positive. And so most of the kids in the past know our dress code, and we remind freshmen as they're transitioning from middle school to high school of, you know, expected behaviors at the high school, because some things change. High school, there's a little bit more skin in the game. You have 4 years to get that diploma and get across that stage at University of Portland, and it's serious. So we use those first couple of weeks to establish relationships with kids, talk to them if they're in violation of dress code. We talk to them about it, explain what the policy is, and we move on. On the day that the students get their planners, we do what we call a pre-teach. And so we have various pre-teaches that are throughout the year over several different things. The first one is generally over the student planner. And some of the topics that are covered in there are the dress code and the attendance policy and procedures. And so the teachers take some time in class to review those policies and procedures with the students. So it's a good reminder, not only for the students, but for the staffs and kind of what those boundaries are, right? This is done on a yearly basis. So at the end of every year, one of the things that the administrative team does is we get together and we review that planner. And we look at the wording, We change wording as necessary. So we know that it needs updated from time to time, so we try to do that on a yearly basis to keep things in compliance. Other reminders then throughout the year. In the student planner, I think it's printed kind of weird this year, so the policies are on one page, the pictures like on the back page of it if you've seen the planner. But there's a picture, and so we have posters that are hanging around school, oftentimes in the classrooms and around the school as reminders for dress code, attendance policies, and others. So biggest issues, some of the biggest issues that we've had, you've already heard about them. Hats and hoods are a huge issue, and the holes in the jeans. And the holes in the jeans over the years seem to have gone from kind of the frayed look to now they just seem to be ripped and bigger holes and bigger holes. And so I would say those are the two biggest infractions at the school. There are midriffs and what I want to call them sleeveless tops or spaghetti strap tops. Those in comparison, from my perspective, are a lesser degree of what we see on a daily basis than the jeans and the hats and the hoods. So those are some of the biggest things. John already talked about, and others have as well, the inconsistencies and of being able to enforce that. So there's 6 administrators at the high school, 4 securities, 3 deans, and like John said, 170 teachers. And as hard as we try to keep things as consistent as we can, there are inconsistencies, and we can always look at ways to improve that and make those inconsistencies more consistent. So with the dress code, again, we try not to make a huge deal of it. We value class time. We want our kids in class. We want them to get their education. And so we have conversations with kids. A lot of times it's just pulling the kid aside because we don't want to publicly embarrass a student, and it's just talking to them about it and say, hey, you know, this is a potential dress code violation, and so on and so forth. As others had mentioned, most of the time, kids have something to put on, all right, whether it's boys or girls. For the boys, mostly it's hats and the hoods. And around the high school, you know, if they forget to take their hat or their hood off when they come in, 99.9% of the time, you just go like this, boom, kids, oh, sorry, okay, forgot, all right? So that takes care of that. Once the pre-teach has gone by, again, we try to keep educating the students. So we believe in educating the students as a whole. We mentioned about preparing them for the future. And so I think part of our job is there's appropriate times to dress appropriately for different sorts of things. In some cases where kids may not have a garment or something to put on, we do have a closed closet as well, the Celtic Heart. Students can have the option to choose some clothes from there to put on if they're in violation. We also have a lot of Scots gear going around the high school that we have available for students. In some cases, I would say rare cases, you know, a parent may be called and asked to bring something in for them. And in the time that I've been there, maybe a couple of times have I seen that happen. We have a pretty diverse community, and if you've been in the high school and you walk down the halls, you'll see and you'll notice that. And we preach and we try to take our diversity within our school as a positive, as a strength and not a weakness. And I feel our students embrace that as well. So during the day, we do what we can to allow the students to express themselves both individually and culturally. And we think that's important that kids have that opportunity. How do the infractions, I guess, my take on an equitable process, if it's boys versus girls, hats and hoods, I would say, are maybe a little bit more than the holy jeans. The holy jeans, to be honest with you, this year, there's as many boys wearing holy jeans as there are girls. And I think it's just the fad of the fashion at this time. Changes in language, as I already stated, with our student planner, we review that on a yearly basis. And so we look at the individual changes from cover to cover in our planner. We make adjustments as needed. All right. Thank you. Anything else?
Sounds like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sounds like you're basically fairly happy with the current code, but I've heard everybody, all the speakers say that a review is good, which I totally agree with. I think that
Yeah, there's challenges, as we said, with consistency and you know, I think we've got a really good working relationship with our students that, you know, again, we learned from them yesterday, and we've got to do better, and that's
just on the surface, do you think that a wholesale, you know, throw out the current policy, incorporate a new one, is that going to be a distraction more so than just trying to review what we have and tune it in with what the public feels that we need without having to really go as far as, you know?
Yeah, I guess I'm for the look at and tune up, and I just feel like, you know, the relationships in particular with the business community that we've had and the people that come in and relate with our students, and when our students go out to business and stuff, the feedback that we get, you know, and we've got our CTE, Career Technical Education teachers, you know, are continually talking about the compliments they get when they go to businesses or we have people come in. And that's important. It makes our kids feel really good, and makes our school and community good, and kids can take that and project it to, hey, you know, this is how a successful person looks and acts and feels, and that's great for us as we prepare students. So that's kind of where I would land, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have some questions. Thanks very much for your testimony. So you mentioned sort of your strong belief that the majority of staff at the high school are supportive of the policy, as are your business partners.
Yeah.
When was the last time you sought parent and family input on the dress code?
It's been a while.
Okay. How about student input on the dress code?
Well, just recently.
When?
So we just talked with our student leadership about
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. One of the things that was alarming to hear was the dynamic of identifying students that are not David Douglas High School students by their violations of the current dress code. What is a standard process for monitoring who comes on and off campus? And is there an explicit communication with SROs or with frontline staff that you are to identify students by their lack of dress code compliance, or how does that work?
I don't understand that, I guess.
I guess I'm concerned that seems to be a practice that.
We have a closed campus, and so we don't allow students to come on our campus during the day.
Right, so how is it that you can identify students that are not supposed to be there by their dress code?
So if a kid comes on wearing a hat or a hood, then a lot of times we'll know that, you know, it can lead us to believe that that student may not be one of ours.
Okay, and they would have gotten on campus just by basic trespassing?
Yeah, we don't have enough personnel to continually watch the students that we have on campus and monitor every way in and out for students. We don't have the personnel to do that.
Okay, thank you. I have a follow-up to that, actually, because that struck me as well. Can you let me know how many times that's happened?
This year, I can't think of one time this year, but it has happened in the past. You know,
anecdotally, once, twice,
what'll happen
10
is,
times?
What'll happen, to be honest with you, is if a school in the area lets out at noon and we don't, then you could expect particularly, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, Centennial or PPS, if they have a half a day and we've got a full day, we'll have kids come on, you know, try to get on campus. I would say it happens at least once or twice a year.
Do those usually lead to incidents, or are people looking for their friends, or are they?
They're usually looking for their friends. Yeah, it's not usually.
So we're not looking for bad outsiders. We're looking for people who
No.
shouldn't be there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, which it's concerning to us as too, and you know, and that's the one of the things that the district has done is, you know, we've got a locking system for our doors.
I know. I
But-
get locked out all the time.
But during passing time, when you've got 1,000 kids on our breezeway, that's a problem.
I have another question about your comments. It's very clear you have a strong perspective. You know, why should we have a dress code? I feel like you have a very strong perspective on that, and it has a lot to do with excellence, behavioral excellence, business-like culture, and I guess my question is, when you're talking to the business community and you have these CTE students going out, into the business community, do you give them extra, is that part of the curriculum to train them on how to dress?
Yep.
So this isn't necessarily something they're wearing to school just because they're wearing it to school that day. They're taught to dress that way.
It's a little bit
For an
above and
environment.
beyond, yes. It's-
Okay.
Yes.
So they're not just coming in wearing what they wore to school to learn in a
Sometimes,
business
certainly.
environment.
Yeah.
Okay. And with the training that you say that the students really need to know why and need to do a better job rolling it out and being consistent, do you talk about your business-like environment, what you're trying to do? Is that
With our-
clear?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. So I've heard from all three groups that it appears that the adult staff in the schools, there's not even training for school staff to implement a dress code. So anecdotally, what I hear is teacher so-and-so dress codes constantly and nobody else does. And I mean, when I say anecdotally, I mean, my kid said that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying other parents tell me that. My kid says, we know that teacher so-and-so is going to dress code if they see anybody doing these things. So I see that as part of this relook at the dress code. It's very clear that everybody needs to be trained on it. And so we don't get teacher X dress coding constantly. And I would hope that if you're getting kids in the office from the same teacher over and over again, that at some point there's a discussion with the teacher. Like, hey, you're a little too focused on this thing. Nobody else is. They've gone all day long. They're in the fourth period, AB day, fourth period of the day. Nobody else has said anything, and yet here's, this student being dress coded. So I would like to make sure that when we look at the dress code, that we also look at a training for everybody to get everybody on board with the same idea of what a dress code violation is or is not.
I also want us to hear the students that testified earlier about the subtle messages sometimes that they're receiving, whether or not they're intended, and to draw your attention to this picture, which I've also seen around campus and at the David Douglas Aquatic Center, which I have a visceral negative reaction to, because I don't think it's appropriate to have images of women's bodies and basically saying don't do this next to guns, which to me is a completely different and much more serious offense, can send a subtle message that I don't think was intended. So just some feedback on that.
Okay, thank you.
Ken, will we be hearing from teachers?
Not this evening, no, we don't have any teachers this evening, but we can. I mean, that's part of the next, well, I don't know what the next steps are. I think that's the conversation with the board. But yeah, we can set up a process for teachers. I think I heard last time teachers, students, and family and community trying to get input.
Yeah, okay.
So this evening, there are no teachers here to.
Are there teachers here? There is one, two.
There's a couple.
Can we
get
hear
some
from
input?
them
Yeah.
if they're here to? Would you mind?
You're all
or-
willing to share.
Would love to hear about it. Thank you.
I'm the activities director at the high school, so I'm our student leadership teacher. I've been in the district for 13 years. I taught at the middle school for 10, and I've been at the high school the last 3, so ask away.
Can we plop them up there?
The thing is, it's live streamed, so it's better if you speak into a mic, because then people can see your.
Jen Busher, she's also a
Yes, please. No, we definitely want to hear from everyone. Yeah.
I'm not prepared, but I can do this.
Yes, you
This is
can.
just talking about normal stuff, so. Hi.
So
Sorry, I just totally pulled you.
It's
with
okay.
me.
I'm Jennifer Busher. I've taught health education at the high school for the last 17 years. This year I'm a dean of students. So if the teachers don't feel comfortable with confronting a student, guess who they send them to? Me. And I would say that the dress code violations this year have been minimal.
Yay.
2
Yeah, it's been.
this whole year. That's
So one of the things that I did this year too, because John and I have been talking a lot about this, and I'm a huge believer in bringing student voice into some of the decisions that we make, because that's obviously who this impacts more than anybody. And so we start with an established group, and I have my leadership kids, which I would say it's a pretty diverse representation of our school, and all different, kinds of kids in there. The conversations that we had with them, I tried to prompt them with, like, let's list out kind of what the administrators did, the pros and the cons. And the con that they kept coming back to was the enforcement not being explicit to them. And a couple of my students even found a school district in, like, Kentucky, I don't know, somewhere random, where it says, like, if this happens, this happens. If this happens, it was very explicit. And that was the biggest thing my senior student council kids kept coming back to, was the fact that they felt like you were saying about, that one teacher that's really adamant on following the dress code to a T, and then the others, like, not sure how to handle it. And for them, it was just that inconsistency that bothered them. Not when we talk, they do want to know the why. You guys bring that up over and over again. Cell phone policy, that has come up a ton in my class, and they actually asked me last year if I would be willing to create the pre-teach and teach everyone about why it's there, because they feel like I told them the why, and they were like, okay, that makes sense. And my big why to them was, you're conversing with somebody. The fun part about going into our cafeteria, as John said, is kids are having conversations face to face, which I don't know if I coach the cheerleaders too, and when there's downtime at practice, what are they doing? This. We did a team meeting. I made them put their phones in the middle of the table so we can all have a conversation, because that's a go-to for kids. And it's a safety point for them too. But when you walk in our cafeteria during lunch, the kids are having conversations, and it's really awesome. And especially in a higher poverty district, our kids need to be having those conversations. They need to be hearing those conversations. So when I talked about that with my student council kids, they were like, oh, okay. Like, they got it. They had the why. And so going back to, setting you up for dressing for success at some point in your life, or whatever it may be. So if the why is, I think, more purposely stated, I think kids could be on board. I didn't say all of them will be on board, but I said they could. And including them. And like you said, surveying, I think surveying the students and the staff and the parents, I think all of that is very important in making a sound decision with the next steps. Mm-hmm. I love having the dress code, but I do think, updating is always, it's been 10 years almost, right? Yeah. 2008, 2009. I mean, we're right around that time where, we should look at it,
So I will just share with you one of the comments. So we oftentimes have students go elsewhere, and then students come back. Yeah. And if they're part of my alphabet, I touch base with them in their intake meetings and whatnot. And students will say to me, at this certain school, they don't even have standards. Like, we can use our cell phones anytime. Everybody in class is on their cell phones. They don't even have a dress code. And so it's always interesting to me that they come back, and what they appreciate is that we have standards for them and that we have expectations for them. And they communicate that to me, but they have to go elsewhere. They go elsewhere, and then they come back and they express their appreciation for that. I would agree with what both John and Joe said. Hats and hoods are probably, you give this to the kids and to our students, and they remove it. As far as what else, holy jeans are probably the biggest dress code issue.
I always joked with my kids about the holes and where they're placed on their jeans. Like I think I have 2 small boys, so our knees are often blown out in their jeans, if anybody has small children. And so I laugh when they have those random holes and that are stylized, and I'm like, that's not, that, it used to be from when they would just fall down and get those natural knee holes, but that's the styles, so. And I also think, going back to the picture you guys have that's around campus, the other conversation my students and I talked about, because I had them get out the dress code and share in small groups, and we talked about having pictures that show, I'm a very positive person, and I like to look at the do's and not the don'ts. That's kind of my style. So updating our poster and our signage with what does a good outfit look like at David Douglas High School? And, if appropriate, have our kids modeling that. Like, why can't our kids do that? I know there might be some
social media contracts and stuff based off of the pictures. But I mean, including our kids in that, I think would be a great way to involve them in the process. So those are just some of my ideas. Do you guys have any questions?
No, I definitely think we should hear from the students directly about how they feel, but I'm curious from your perspectives as educators, do you know of your peers that have any kind of negative or positive feeling one way or the other about your job to enforce the dress code, as that being part of your duties?
It's all over the place. So yeah, it's all over the place. But like I said, I did teach in the classroom for 17 years, and sometimes it can be uncomfortable for male teachers to help a female student when there's stuff hanging out. So there would be times when the male teacher would come down the hallway and say, hey, can you chat with this girl about her dress code or whatever. So I do think that there are times when people are uncomfortable. But for the most part, our staff does, I mean, it's all about relationships. And again, you'll have to hear from the students, but it's all over the board. If they're not comfortable having the conversation, they usually get sent to an administrator, so the teacher doesn't have to even have the conversation. Just, hey, go up to the office and check in with whoever. Yeah, and I would say it is all over the board, and in the past 3 or 4 years between retirements and new teachers on board, I mean, 170 staff members, it's hard to kind of, who feels comfortable, who doesn't, like, what do you know versus what do you know in the process. I think it's just the education aspect to staff and getting us all on the same page, I think, is really important. When I was in the middle school more so, my next door neighbor was a male teacher, and he would grab me often to be like, so-and-so's got, like, there was this big point of time where leggings, like, you had to wear like a shirt that covered it a certain amount. Like, there was this legging issue for a chunk of time, kind of like what we're dealing with holes right now. And so I would have conversations with kids, but it was more just, they just grab a sweatshirt and tie, like they were like see-through. That happened a lot, if you get what I'm saying. And so I would have those conversations, but it's the relationship building and how you interact with the kid and solving those situations to make them not feel shamed, or, you just want to teach them in a positive, appropriate manner, I guess is.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I welcome any of you guys, if you guys want to come. I teach in the morning. My student council kids would love to have any of you guys in.
That, yeah.
One day I teach freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, and one day's seniors only. And so if you guys want to come on in, I know it's not a whole representation of our school, but I will say my student council kids have a lot of friends that aren't necessarily like the 3.5 GPA. Like, they have friends of, that's the thing about David Douglas. Everybody's friends with everybody. I mean, I feel like I see that. And so I think that they'd be a good voice, but.
Thank you.
I should mention, just from history, since you're inviting people in, is several years ago, actually, board members were invited as a panel so your students could grill us on being an elected official.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, one of the things we just implemented this year was an ASB meeting the third Wednesday of every month, and we set it up like this. They have placards with their names and their positions, and they feel official and important, and they're starting to understand the process, and we follow Robert's Rules of Order now, and it's kind of like the system that we're putting in place. But the biggest part of it is to get them to understand that process and be a voice. So having some more applicable stuff coming their way, they'd appreciate that for sure. But yeah, we'll grill you too if you come, I'm sure. They ask a lot of questions.
So Kyle's got.
Oh yeah, Anwar's my ASB president, so he's one of the kiddos that is a part of my senior class council, so he's fantastic. Do you guys have any other questions for us specifically?
I don't have any questions, just some comments for my peers, but thank you, unless anybody else does.
I just wanted to say, it sounds like you're in agreement then that we need to do a review. And I think that we're all in agreement with that. But it sort of sounds like, on the other hand, that you're not really having real difficulties with the current policy. I mean, here and there, but it sounds like, from what you said, when you point something out, the kids aren't putting up a big fight.
No, kids are really respectful. It's all about how you talk to them, though. Kids want to be treated like Human beings. Human beings. And so if you're like, put your hood away, and you get all sassy with them, then they're gonna go to defense mode right away. It's all about that relationship you have. And I think we have a pretty awesome staff, specifically speaking to the high school, you know, because that's where I'm at. But most of them do their best to approach those situations in an appropriate manner. And any kid that I've had to say, hey, remember, take your hood off or put your phone away, school started, they don't fight you on it. They will do it. They will. And it's just all about that interaction you have with them.
I want to thank you for your time.
And here's this is kind of a funny example. So I have one, the sleeveless tops are really in right now. With and like maybe a strap.
Maybe a strap, and most of them are fine. Anyways, there's this one girl that we've had a conversation about it before, and I started walking towards her, and she's like, I already know. She's like, I have a jean jacket, I'm gonna put it on right now. And I was like, okay, have a good day. So the kids know. The kids know. I haven't wrote one referral this year for dress code violation. There's been conversations, a handful, but there has been no referrals up to this point of the school year.
I think most people try and use it as a teachable moment.
Absolutely.
So. I was thinking about the other thing, Christine, I think you mentioned about the first period to the fourth period. I had that happen last year. I taught at the end of the day. The big problem is with our air conditioning is kids will be freezing, and it's Oregon weather. Like, you're freezing in the morning, and then by the end of the day, sometimes outfits magically change over the day too. Right. So that has been a problem before, but having that conversation is never usually, kids aren't gonna be upset about that, so.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
I think Kyle has a comment.
Well,
now?
just a couple things.
Kyle, do you mind
Oh,
real
not at
quick?
all.
Okay, just
Not at
real
all.
quick, because
No,
I'm not
not at all.
sure. Originally, the high school administrators had coverage in other games, so I just don't know. They might exit, so just want to make sure there's no specific questions for them. And I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, that's fine. But I want to make sure if they need to get to a soccer game or wherever it is. But before we go into discussion mode, two things, if you don't mind, because others might leave as well. I just want to thank all of our administrators, teachers for being here, and just no matter what the conversation is, I will go on record saying these are all first-class educators who care about kids first, period. I believe that with my heart. I believe that they're doing the best for kids every single day. They care about kids, they care about those relationships, and they're the real deal, every single one of them. And I just want to thank them for being here, and I appreciate their presentation. I want the board to hear. None of it was canned, none of it was, we gave them prompts and said, please have at it. You know, we want the truth, we want to know what's going on, so what you heard was them, not us, so just to be clear there as well. And then, John, will you mind, because you passed this out, taking your elevator?
I was mentioning we're goal-oriented, and our leadership group, which consists of just our admin team plus our department division chairs, which we have 11 different departments, and also some of our teachers on special assignment. They are our leadership crew. When I said we make a 3-year plan, every 3 years we look at every year we look at our data several times, but the third year we basically make a goal. And so we had, I think our graduation rate was at 75% at that point, or 76. But we decided to make a goal 1% higher than the national average for 2019, I think. And so that's what we're working towards. And so we've got those posters, which were made in our makerspace, with a couple of quotes from our students that are on there. And so please put that somewhere, and you're part of our goal as well, I hope. And I hope that you'll come over and again, invitation to come over and check out what we're doing. We're very proud of it.
Thank you. Can you tell me when the parent survey is coming back? When will we get results from that?
The end of November.
Okay, thanks. Because that'll give us at least some information about where parents are on the issue.
And that was standard in that it went out in all the languages.
Our 5 top languages
okay,
is what
cool.
it goes out
Yeah.
in, yeah.
Mhm.
So it hasn't gone out yet. It will go out in next 2 weeks, yeah, last week of October.
And if they return their surveys in that language, we'll be able to get an interpretation of that language back into English.
So we
Okay.
have hard
All
copies
right.
in the
Cool.
language, they'll be returned in that, and then
Great.
and then also online, when they click on it, if they click on their specific code, one of the reasons they have a code is because it goes specifically there translated.
Great, that's so cool. Thank you.
Kyle?
Are you
Thank you, guys.
opening?
Your turn.
Sorry to interrupt, Kyle, if we're over.
Oh, no.
You can have a turn.
Do you have any?
Go ahead.
Okay. So a couple of things, just from my perspective, just to share with the board, around dress code. When it's brought to our attention that there's issues with enforcement of the dress code, that's board business. This is my opinion. I'm not dictating. I don't sit over there, right? So that's board business. The dress code itself, that's not board business. That's administration business. A request to consider an update to the dress code, that's board business. So, you know, if our board is going to be considering setting the dress code, have a good time. I'm not going to help you, right? That's them. So that's my opinion. When that's done, and when they get to where they can get through their negotiation, right, Article 9, on and on, the fact that it's in the handbook, all that's done, then we can see it, and if we don't like it at that point, then I do believe it is board business, absolutely.
You're right about that, although I would also add that it is our business to set goals and policies around ensuring equity, gender equity.
Was the
Exactly.
the first part, that
Right.
if there's disparity in how it's being presented or dealt with, that's board business.
But it's also what you include or don't include that could violate equity policy. Could.
I'd like to make a suggestion.
And I'll
'cause
finish
we-
my comments some other time.
Since we've.
I didn't realize I cut you off. Please, please.
No, you guys,
Well, he might like my suggestion.
Oh, I won't, I definitely won't have your suggestion, but okay.
Okay, but my suggestion, because we've spent 2 meetings on this, and it's more to inform us. But I'd like to assign it to the superintendent to get a group together, which includes administrators, teachers, parents, and students, to review it, where they could spend some really time hashing it out and come back to us with a draft, updated dress policy or dress code.
I like that suggestion, and I also think it's worth taking some time now to have some board members give some input into what we would expect out of that first draft. I'm really concerned by a lot of things that I heard tonight through both the public comment period and the administrator presentations. Having read the current dress code in the handbook myself, I think I agree with the assessment that a lot of the language is just really subjective. It centers the male gaze. It is near impossible to enforce, and it is predominantly about monitoring young women and young girls' bodies, and that is not acceptable. I also kind of want to, I do understand that from the administrators and educators standpoint, it might seem this, why are we talking about dress code? There's so many other bigger important things. I get that. I also want to draw the connection that a dress code and the way it's enforced and the why behind the dress code directly impacts school climate and sense of safety and dignity on the campus. And when that is damaged, that does affect how we can do our work in educating students. So I think it is important to address and to bring up. One thing that didn't come up in testimony, but I think is important to highlight is the penalization of poverty, or not a lot of students are able to even control when they have tears in their pants, right? So I want to make sure that we're not calling kids out and causing any shame, not just around body, but also around economic status. I do think a lot of the language currently promotes body shaming, so to the extent that we can be body positive in the draft, I think will be important. I want the burden of enforcement to be really clear. I don't want teachers, I want our district and our teachers to be out of the business of enforcing and monitoring clothing. I want there to be a very clear delineation of the parents and the families and the students themselves own their bodies and their dresses, and they need to be able to have that authority returned to them. I think beyond that, the thing about I do think that this current dress code is not inclusive of all genders either. I think that we should have some language around that. And then for it to be consistently applied to all schools. I don't know why different schools have different ways of messaging it out, and it's presented differently. Some have images, some are just text. We heard, you know, about the need to be really explicit of if XYZ infraction, then Y consequence, like, you know, what, like, be clear with it. And I think, I mean, that's really most of my comments. Yeah.
Kyle, do you have more comments you'd like to make?
Yeah. There is a disparity in how it's managed. I can tell you firsthand. I have two boys. They both ran track. Springtime, warm weather. If you can imagine yoga pants on boys, right? That's what running tights are, right? Yeah. And certainly I will tell you that we have the same problem with some female teachers not being comfortable addressing particular dress code violations. But also, I mean, we tested it at our house, the tank top rule. Our boys can wear whatever tank top they want. Doesn't matter how thin the strap is. So we know there's concerns, right? And those things need to be addressed, and they were brought to the attention of the administration, right? And it is what it is. I just think that first and foremost, we trust the educators to do the job of educating the students. And certainly we set the guidelines and the rails, and please stay within the rails. This is an area where I trust them. I do think, you know, I think maybe this board let it go too long without having been reviewed. I think, you know, there was probably some other priorities maybe that were being considered, and this wasn't. And it probably wasn't brought up and maybe wasn't considered. You know, I don't remember hearing dress code as an issue, but probably in the formulation of this dress code, there should be and we will review it as a district consecutively. That's really it. I mean, there's a bunch of other things, but they're more just for the board, so.
So it sounds like we want the administration to put together a group of administrators, teachers, faculty, faculty, parents, students to
the only thing that I would add is we made a joint decision that we were going to make decisions based on data, and I bring it up every meeting. Community engagement is extremely important to me. So I just want to make sure that while we have this small group that's working there, we also do our effort to, you know, have some maybe listening sessions with folks in different languages, or that we also look at the survey that we're going to put out, that we talk to the youth beyond this small group, because you mentioned that your children had issues, and my kids are wanting to be comfortable. So even if we're not hearing it from the administrators, we're hearing it in our families, and I think it's important just to listen. It's very, very interesting to hear multiple perspectives on this issue. I don't think, Bryce, I feel like maybe there's some concern that we just want to cut and paste the Oregon Now model and have it become the David Douglas policy. Some of your questions were directed sort of at that. I don't think that's what any of us are interested in doing. I think what we want to do is to have a fair, equitable policy that's clear, that's enforceable, that everybody understands, students, administrators, teachers, and so that we create a learning environment where there is clarity and people are able to make this 84%.
And then just also methodologically, I mean, I think we've heard a lot from the administrators. We've heard Morgan now. I wonder if we even maybe focus group out some of the parent and student perspective stuff, so we're not, it's just to make the process a little bit more effective. So when it comes down to drafting the policy, we already have the data that we need. Instead of trying to put a roundtable together and read, we would be duplicating work. So that's my suggestion.
I was just going to say, when you talk about bringing parents together, that could be a charge of that group to bring in the different, larger, have meetings where they listen to parents and stuff.
Yeah, and some of our schools already have parent groups that are meeting. You know, there's a Latino night at our Menlo, and there's lots of things that are existing already. We don't have to recreate. We can just come in and say, we want to talk to you about this, and ask some of those same questions that were asked of administrators. and make it a little easier to do our work.
Probably will find you have better attendance coming to the meeting because you actually have something to discuss with them.
Okay.
I don't think I'm as concerned, Stephanie, with like a wholesale throw out the one we have versus the now policy. I guess I'm just thinking, you know, from what I've heard tonight, it doesn't sound like there's a big problem anyway. But I would say that I think it needs to be reviewed. I think we were all in agreement with that, and the committee would be fantastic. So, I mean, I'm in total agreement with that, but it's just, you know, kind of how the whole thing started. And I guess I will say I'm glad that it was brought to our attention, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Ken, what is a realistic timeline for a draft updated policy?
Well, excuse me, go ahead. I don't know. I'd like to ask that I can sit down with my team and develop a plan and kind of backwards plan a little bit. I can tell you I would not think a good timeline is next month.
Right.
I would like to get some parent input, talk to Amber. She left, talk to the high school. What about kids groups and kids input, and what does that look like? Talk to our administrators and experts and just kind of design a plan, but I would probably around the new year, if it was a draft policy and draft kind of idea, that would be, I would say, the earliest.
I think January is good.
And we want to do it right, to be quite honest. If we're going to do this, let's sit down, take this input, and design a plan that engages families, engages community. What does that look like, and how do we get the data to put together and review, input, update, whatever the right word is. Yeah, so, but again, if there is an expectation other than that, or if there's, what I'd like to do again is develop, after we have this initial brainstorm, develop kind of a mock timeline, mock plan, get some input from the board on it. Any thoughts, suggestions, concerns, then we can go from there.
Can we post that to the website publicly?
Oh, of course,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Do you feel like you have everything you need to get that first start?
yes, yeah, I do, absolutely. Thank you so much for the input, really appreciate it.
You guys ready to move on?
Oh,
I
there's
told
more.
you guys I was starting to get sick, okay? So as I sit here and my fever increases,
I'm so
yeah,
sorry.
no,
Can we get a
I'm good.
bio break? Yeah.
Oh,
People kind of nodded,
yeah.
if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's have a 5-minute break. Sound good?
As soon as you hit the gas.
back in session, and we're going to have an annual staffing report given by Candy Wallace, our fabulous, what's your title? Assistant? Associate? Assistant Superintendent?
Yes.
I don't even know if an associate superintendent's a thing.
You got the fabulous right.
All right, well, it is October, and it is time for the yearly staffing report, and I look forward to giving it because we do have an amazing staff. I think you heard it over and over and over again. It is just something that we are so proud of, and we know it is the single most important thing we can do is hire amazing staff. So I know there was a community member who was hoping we would have done this sooner, and I want to kind of explain why we wait till October every year, and that is because a lot of times we're still hiring in September. And it takes some time to get all that data put in and extracted, and in fact, even as of today, we have a couple open positions. So it takes some time, that hiring. So I appreciate your patience with us. What I'm going to do is draw your attention to the packet that you have in front of you, and I'm going to go over all kinds of information today with you in regard to our staffing. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt at any time. So what you're seeing up here is our total FTE for the 2017-18 school year, but also I've shown you kind of a 3-year picture there, and really our total is at 1384. We are down just a few for staff, but the big one you'll notice is under licensed. So the first number that you see there is kindergarten through 12th grade, and then the plus, the 147, that's our pre-K program pre-K all around, MECP and our pre-K programs. So the biggest change you'll see is that there is a reduction in 10 FTE right there at licensed.
I don't understand confidential.
Oh, okay. So confidential is it's not.
You can't tell us, right?
Yeah, sorry, it's confidential. So it's an employee who works under a supervisor who is involved in bargaining. So if they have any type of role that involves getting information around bargaining, or well, typically it's getting information or even directly involved in the bargaining process, those are confidential. So they're not technically under the classified group.
Okay, that's like just.
Or are they in the supervisor group?
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so our average years of experience is 12.13 years, and you'll see that the majority, I'll call us a relatively younger staff, younger in terms of years of experience, because if you look from 0 to 15, that's where the majority of our staff lies right now. So, in fact, 533 of them are in that first category. Next up is our staff education level. Again, you'll see the majority is at master's or master's plus. And in order to become a teacher, they've changed the requirements over the last couple of years. It used to be a 5-year degree, and now it's only required to be a 4-year degree. But you'll see later, it's interesting, our teachers are still coming in mostly with a master's degree. So maturity level, this is actual ages. You'll see the largest group is in the age group of 31 to 40, and then the next one being 41 to 50. And then we get to demographics. So first off, I want to say, before I even go over this slide, the categories that you see, the Asian, Black, Hispanic, American Indian, Pacific Island, multi, and white, those are the exact categories that we report to the state. Those are our reporting categories. So that's why those are there. So
self-reported, right?
This is self-reported, correct. Self-reported. So what you're going to see, obviously, is under our Asian teacher demographic, we have 21 current teachers. It's 2.67% of the teacher population, but compared to the 15.1% of the student population. So as I go through our report, I am going to show there's some celebrations. There is some growth in our teacher diversity, but as you can see, compared to that, there's still quite a gap in between teacher diversity and student diversity. And that is why our superintendent has charged us with a goal of a hiring plan that you will see as part of our cabinet goals. That's just something that you can see right here that we still do need to address.
And just for clarity, this is just licensed, not because it says
So
staff.
far, this is just licensed.
Okay.
And I'll show you the rep, I have the other categories as well.
Do you have the percent change from last year to this year in these numbers?
I can get that for you, sure.
And Candy, back to the self-reporting, if somebody doesn't want to report, what happens to that? There's not a not reported category that we report to the state.
I don't know that we've had that, but it looks like Ken might know.
I do know. So we have to fill in a blank. So we have had in the past, is we're required to fill something in. So what happens is typically we have had staff ask, do we have to do this, which we don't force them, but we do communicate if you don't, we're required, we can't leave it blank. So we're required and we communicate, we will just pick this one or other or whatever. So usually when we communicate, in fact, not usually, I don't know of a time where a staff member has said, fine, do that. They've said, oh, okay, we understand. So it's less about us forcing them and more about we're required. And when we communicate that, oh, okay, and they.
And this is ODE that's?
Yeah, I think it's actually part of the federal. I'd have to look up the exact statute for you, Christine.
I really don't like a situation where we're self-reporting, and if somebody chooses not to report, that's not an option. So
That's something that we can take to our lobbyist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There you go.
And we will double check on that because I don't have the statute. I want to make sure I'm communicating that right. I've been out of HR for a few years now, so to make sure I'm accurate.
Right, and I have not experienced that at all in my role, but that's because when they do the intake, when I say they, when new teachers do an intake, it's with our HR department, and I'm not present at most of those, so, right. Okay. So administrator demographics, we have a total of 42 administrators, and you can see the numbers and percentages up there. Something that I want you to know that I think is a celebration or is showing some growth is that this year we hired what I'll say 10 administrators. 4 of those administrators were already existing in our district and moved to other positions, but 6 of our administrators are brand new to those positions. 3 out of the 6 are culturally diverse. So that's a celebration.
Do you mean
for us.
non-white?
I mean non-white.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we should specify that. I mean, when you talk about diversity, you talk about the whole cohort as being diverse, which half is like maybe diverse, but I think we should be specific around.
Okay.
We're talking about people of color.
You know, it's interesting you say that, and because I am just going to be honest here, originally I had non-white. That's what I had up there.
Yeah,
and then I
culturally
thought,
diverse. We're
well,
all
does
culturally diverse, but what does that mean? Yeah, non-white.
non-white. So you'll see I use the culturally diverse term again, but I originally had non-white up there and went back and forth between that, so I appreciate the feedback. And the other thing that I wanted to point out that in the 2016, so last year's Oregon Educator Equity Report, David Douglas was highlighted. They were stood out. So I'm just going to read the quote. Although no school district has shown consistent increases in the diversity of their teaching workforce at significant levels, 3 school districts had interesting trends in the diversity of their administrative workforce. So David Douglas School District, the percentage of administrators of color has doubled since 2013-14 from 8 to 17%. So that was a huge report that you can get online, but it was really neat to kind of see our district highlighted there. So here's the classified.
Ask one question.
Yes.
You have.
Can you speak into the mic?
Oh, sorry. I hate to be in the way. You have one block, but I thought we had at least one block administrator at the high school, and then now Ms. Tay had, or is she not? Mr. Carradine?
Not at the high school.
Mr. Carradine isn't there?
He's an athletic director, so.
Oh,
he's
that's
under
not considered in.
He's under the teaching contract.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. So classified demographics, again, what you're going to see is this group is more culturally diverse than the teaching staff and also than the administrator staff. So the numbers are a little bit higher there. And then, like I shared with you, our new teachers, we have 55 licensed staff this year. And out of those, 75% have a master's degree. They came in with a master's degree. Again, that's not a requirement anymore, but they are coming in with that degree. 45% of them are first-year teachers, so they've had 0 experience. And then 36% of them have taught 1 to 5 years, with the average teaching experience of those 55 of 2.69 years. And then out of those, 9 of the 55 are non-white. So 16.4% of our new hires are non-white. So I always like to show where our new teachers go. And so as you can see at pre-K, we hired 8 there. At elementary, 23, middle school, 12, high school, 12, and then the TOSAs, well, actually, there were 2 there, I believe, that we just hired, so that's not reflected in there. So you can see which building they went to. So Cherry Park had 1, EB 2, and so on. And what I like to point out in this slide, and I said it earlier in my presentation, the most important thing we can do as a staff or as an administration is to hire. That is the number 1 thing that we can do. Because when you hire right, then they're good to kids. And so what you see up here, these numbers, when I see them, it may look like, you know, a small amount of numbers, but the hours that are put into that from our principals is amazing. They go to great lengths to make sure they are getting the best candidates. Okay, so a look at attrition. So even though we did reduce by 10 FTE for this year, we were able to do that without a reduction in force. And then that's through attrition. So we had 16 retirements last year, 33 resignations, and then 19 leaves. And then you can kind of see the 4-year comparison of where we're at with each of those. Homegrown, something we're always proud of as well, and it grows a little tiny bit each year. 115 of the district's employees have graduated from David Douglas High School. 45 of those are licensed teaching staff, and 70 are classified. So something that I just thought was important to know about our current practices and some strategies that we use currently use to increase staff diversity. Before I do that, though, I want to call your attention. You have a blue sheet in front of you, and this sheet here that came from the Oregon Educator Equity Report that I just shared with you. That quote. That's where this is coming from. And I thought it was just interesting to share with you because what this is showing you, the top page is the demographics of program completers. So teachers who completed and got a license in the state of Oregon from all of our universities and college prep programs. So you can see that, I mean, it's kind of small, sorry, but when you look at, for example, let's see, 15 total in the state for, and this is a 15-16 report. I don't know why, they're a couple years behind often, or that's the way it works. But in that particular year, so there was 15 American Indian or Alaskan Natives that were completed a teaching program in the state of Oregon. So if you think about this, what that means to us, what that means is there's a limited amount of teachers in that particular area, or I'll just say in general, non-white, that 197 districts are called vying for. 197 districts who are saying, you know, come our way. So I'm telling you that because there's some things that we need to do or can at least try to do to increase the diversity in our teaching or in our staff. So what you have in front of you on this slide is some of the practices. I want to be clear, I'm just going to skim over these. I could really, well, not me, but we could have someone talk about each one of those for hours on end. And actually, I hope that you would like to have that to a certain degree this year, to have someone talk about these, because again, I'm just going to skim over them, but there's some things that we're really proud of. So just starting with the Scottston Nights program, on your tables you have a brochure, and I see Christine's already looking at hers. This is a program that the high school just started last year with Warner Pacific College, and I know it's been mentioned before, but again, something that they are really, really proud of. We are proud of. It just got off just got off the ground. So they're right now currently recruiting and just kind of trying to gather their candidates. So at some point, I'd love to have them share how many kids are involved and what that looks like. But basically, it seeks out juniors and seniors. It's that pipeline. It's that pathway, right? We start now, and even in some reports, it's saying we should start that in middle school. But we're at least starting this with Warner Pacific. And basically, you can see they get to go to Warner Pacific. They get 2 college credits. They get a high school credit. It's free. The books are available for them, and transportation is available to them. So that's just something that again that we're proud of. The Bilingual Teacher Pathway Program, that's our longest, what I'll call program to increase staff diversity. That's been 19 years. And really what that program is about is it encourages our current classified employees to complete a teacher program. And by doing that, we alter their schedules, and we do have folks that take advantage of this. We alter their schedules so they can go to class and get there on time, or if they need to leave early, we try to make that happen for them. When they go through the program, they get placed in our buildings, and then until they get a teaching job, which hopefully it's with us, we'll save the current position that they're in. So. Teach Oregon partnership. That was a 5-year partnership that we were a part of with PSU and a couple of other districts. And again, the idea around that was to first off, have a really direct connection with a university, number one, but also to get groups or cohorts of student teachers in our buildings. And I think the high school, how many did they have, Kel?
Currently, I think they have approximately 17 teachers from Portland State University that's in a cohort model.
Yeah. So, and then we have other buildings that participate in that as well. So out of the Teach Oregon partnership came Cultures Connecting, and that's an organization that we worked with as a result of that. But it was a few things that we've worked with them on. One was hiring a diverse workforce, and so there was a 4-day training around that. And then also we got some coaching from the Cultures Connecting, and that was really all around just some guidance on the hiring process. And then just looking at our job postings and our interview process, eliminating historical barriers, and just evaluating and updating those. Again, something we've done in the past, this was at least, I want to say 3 years ago, we created a hiring guide, trained our administrators on some consistencies, on the process and just focused on, again, reducing the biases within the process. Again, job fairs are really important. The one main one that we do is the Oregon Job Fair. And even if we're not hiring a whole lot of teachers that year or have very many openings, we still go. We want to make those personal connections and get people to know David Douglas and have a conversation with them, regardless of what we're even have open. We're there. One thing that will be in our hiring work plan will be to attend different job fairs. So, for example, we just got a call yesterday about a culturally diverse job fair that we hadn't heard of before. So we'll definitely be at that one for this upcoming year. So that's something that we do, but we can do more of. And then finally, something we do to increase staff diversity, but also just maintain and keep our new teachers, and that's our mentor program and New Teacher Academy. And again, Brooke and her team could talk about this for a long time, but it's something we're really, really proud of. And we have mentors at a district level where they spend a significant amount of time, I believe it's about 75 hours per year, with every single new teacher, just to give the support, because the first 3 to 5 years are pretty critical in keeping a staff member. So they work closely and develop really close relationships, and they are in their classrooms a lot and give the feedback. We have that for coaching, but we also have building coaches. We have numerous in every building where teachers can access for support, for ideas, for feedback, and so that is something that we really pride ourselves in. I don't think a lot of other districts have that, and our candidates, we want candidates to look at our district, and I know candidates are looking for that. What kind of support will I get if I come to this district? And they know, we share that. At the job fairs, we share that. People know the kind of support they get. Because of our mentor program, the New Teacher Academy, it's a monthly class that they all attend. It's something that is a requirement if they are hired in our district. So much of that just really helps us keep the teachers that we do hire, because we know if we don't keep them, it's a financial loss as well. I mean, it's $15,000 to $25,000 depending on how much training they received and how long they stay with us. So that, like I said, was a whole lot of information, just skimming it. Again, if there's any one of those things that you would like us to share, we would be happy to come back and do that. But you heard this time and time again, we have amazing staff. We're very proud of our staff. If there's ever a time that you are able to go in and observe someone teaching at any level, they love it. They truly do. They're used to people coming in, mostly because the coaches do it all the time, but if you get that opportunity, they would welcome it, and I'd encourage you to do that. So, any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So, okay, I know that the way you've broken down the ethnicities is because of the federal reporting requirements. I think we can do better than that. I would like to see us disaggregate, especially within the API population. And I want to update some of our nomenclature around Hispanic, Latino, just so that we can have a more accurate breakdown there. I would like to see I'm interested in pay equity as well, as it intersects with the race issue. So I want to see a breakdown of how the race and ethnicity representation breaks down by pay grade, I guess, for license and for classified. Yeah.
So that would be tied to the length of time they've been a teacher, right?
Yeah.
And
Probably.
contractual.
Yeah, it's
contractual.
It's contractual.
Right.
I can share.
Yes.
Yeah, it'd be good to look at it,
The
please.
contracts and the pay scale and
I want to know in each pay scale what the racial and ethnic breakdown looks like.
Well, then you're just going to, what you're asking for is the duration of time. You're looking what she wants.
What kind of education they have, that's.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you compile that data?
I will see what we can do.
Okay.
I will see what we can do. So is someone writing that down?
I got it.
I think.
I got it. Yes,
Okay,
I do believe
cool.
we can. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you know, if we can make it happen, we'll get you what you need for sure.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested in the attrition. I want to see how that breaks down by race and ethnicity also, and I'm curious to see how culturally relevant the teacher mentor program is, the new teacher academy. I want to make sure that when we do the work to hire these very few and far between POC educators, that we're holding on to them with everything we have. And, you know, relating also to recruitment, have we considered, or can we consider recruiting beyond Oregon? Because I know that looking at these numbers is pretty dire. It's a small pool that we're recruiting from. And my question related to that also is how competitive are we, honestly speaking, comparatively? How competitive are we? What can we do to increase our attractiveness to these graduates? Can we look at incentives? You know, what can we do to make ourselves the best offer? And then how can we also look beyond Oregon? Are my initial kind of responses and questions. Yeah, that's it.
Responses now, or would you like?
Your call.
Okay. Well, I know it's getting late, but everything you just said, we've talked about as a cabinet team. And when you look at superintendent's goals, which by default are cabinet goals, and when it comes to hiring plan, all of that has resonated. And to be totally honest with you, don't have answers for all of it yet, but do have plans. You know, when it comes to recruiting or job fairs across the nation, that can happen. It comes to funding that, obviously.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's an excuse, it's just a reality of what we need to do if that's what we need to do.
Right.
There is some research around how successful that is or not that the board might want to look at and consider. Our big push and big focus has been talking about the pipeline, talking about really our future.
Our own kids,
Yes. Kind of, we know what our community and diversity, how do we reach that and tap into that and support that, right? We used to have a program in this district where the board gave scholarships, and what if we instituted something like that? Rather than going to a job fair, we gave scholarships to 3 students of color, or 3 underrepresented or marginalized students, or whatever criteria we come up with. So I'm not arguing against a job fair. It's just there are many things I think we can look at, and many things that we need to continue to improve on, and as you said, be somewhat ruthless about it, right? How do we come up with? Now, incentivizing can do as well. There's a little bit that has to go through the union on that. Again, that's not a bad thing. It's just a fact. Anytime that we're paying or looking at, we would have to include the union and have conversations with them about that as well.
Do we know if it's a goal of the union? I mean, do we know where they are on this issue?
No.
I mean, we
I don't
know.
think it matters. I think we.
I just, it matters because they can help, you know.
I think it's important to me that we set a goal for ourselves of who we're targeting for recruitment, and like very clear percentage goals of who we're hiring, and who we decide to hire becomes who the union decides to represent, right? So that's where I stand there.
Which will be part of our hiring plan.
Yeah.
So what kind of info do we have on the Scots Tonight's program?
So
How are students selecting this Ed 250 class? Is it just like on their list of electives and they can pick it, or are teachers saying, hey, you know what, you're really good at helping other kids in class, maybe you want to become a teacher and look what we have for you? I mean, what's happening with that?
Right. Well, it definitely is a class they can choose, but they are heavily recruiting. They're not done yet, and it was 3 nights ago. They had an evening event, and this was I spoke with Linda Vansel about it, and she said there was a lot of kids in the room and a lot of kids of color in the room. So it's really exciting. The question is who will actually sign up and follow through with that process, and because again, it's a recruiting process, and you try to gain the interest and get the excitement going around it.
There's multiple points for recruitment going on here.
There
I mean,
is.
let's face it, we're trying to recruit our own children to become
Absolutely.
teachers, and Warner Pacific is trying to recruit our students
Oh,
to go to college there. I
absolutely.
mean, we know. I mean,
Sure.
Which is fine.
It's a win-win.
It's a good thing, and especially if we, have more of their classes on this side of town, that would be really great. But yeah, so I'm wondering if, you know, the middle school thing, if starting to talk about this
Right.
for our
Because
middle
what I'm
schoolers and
reading-
having them go on a trip to Warner Pacific and see
Right.
that school.
My granddaughter, I'm helping once a week in that class, and they went out, and I think this may help your recruiting at some point. She's only in third grade, but they had reading buddies in kindergarten, and the third grade class went down to read with the kindergartners and help them with their reading. So in some ways, those are little ways to encourage kids.
Because they're the teachers, right?
Yeah.
They love that too. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to?
One thing.
Kyle?
Sometimes it can seem like we're on you, I think.
Me,
No,
personally?
just the cabinet. You guys are doing good work, and when you guys sink your teeth into something, I've seen the results, and so I'm really pleased that this is something that you are taking the initiative on. I'm sure we'll have lots of other input, but again, just to say it, because we usually don't, because we just kind of, oh, that's how it is. It's a problem that everybody has, and there's 3 districts in the state that are doing better than others. And I know you're not happy with where we are.
We aren't.
But every once in a while, okay, every once in a while, take a step back and say, you know what? Good work. Now, how can we be better? Okay?
Thank you.
Kyle.
I echo that. I think
I
that,
echo that too. Yeah.
yeah.
Can I add to that too? And I thank you so much for saying that. And I wish that could have been said with more.
Eric will tell.
Yeah, thank you. But I do want to say, and I think Anna asked, are we competitive? And I'm not sure what you meant on that question, but one thing I can say, and I think I shared it in the summer, was that when you come to the job fair, our district is not really that big compared to others. And our line is huge. And I think one of the reasons why is this, because people hear about what we're able to accomplish and they want to be part of it. And oftentimes people wait in line, and part of my job, which I don't know what that says about me, but I'm out talking to the people that are in line, trying to ease their nerves a little bit because they're nervous because they get 2 or 3 minutes to sit down and talk with us. And it's so interesting to me. I always ask them, well, what are you doing in our line? Why are you here? And I think when we're competitive, I just really want to hope that we can maintain our focus and keep that, because I think David Douglas is seen in teacher education programs coming out as a special place to go.
But that long line, and that's fantastic, that's wonderful, but is that long line that you're seeing still majority white? Because if it is, then we need to be recruiting elsewhere. That long line
Yeah,
needs
I would
to be.
say yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I agree, as part of our plan, like I said this, when we just got a call yesterday, and I was like, oh, a culturally diverse job fair, we're in. So I think there's like I said, when you say, I know you're not happy where we're at, we're not happy with all of it. We've had some growth that we're very happy about and proud of, but we know we can always do better. And we know that there's things that we need to do, and that's on the radar for sure of what we can do even this year to try to increase. But I will tell you, the one thing, without a doubt, what I am very happy about and am very proud of is our existing workforce. All of them, classified administrators and our certified group. I'm just so proud to be a part of this district. They are amazing, amazing people. And you saw it out here. I mean, their relationships that they build with kids and how much they care, it shows. And that's something that we should be proud of, and we are.
I think ultimately, you saw we're involved in programs, we're engaged in programs, and I'll answer a little more direct, I think, than Andy did. I think the line is majority white. I mean, just looking at the data that
Right.
Candy, there's only a certain specific amount of graduates of teachers
Yeah.
of color. That's just a reality.
Yeah,
So
so then-
your not request, I'll even say demand, and I don't mean that negatively, right? It's no more acceptable. And we've talked about this as a cabinet. The teachers aren't there, right? I mean, we could easily say the teachers aren't there. What are we going to do? we aren't going to accept that anymore. We have to be advocates and figure out what the answer is. It might take some investments, job fairs. It definitely is going to take building our own pipeline. It's going to take time, to be quite honest. It's not going to happen overnight, but we will see growth. We will see plans. We have one principal in our audience, and I know our principals are ready. They want to hire. They understand the research. They understand that a reflection in the workforce, the reflection for teachers, for kids is important, and we want to go in that direction. I don't think there's any resistance, or
That's
it's
great to
just
hear.
developing that and really being active about it and just relentless.
Right, and having that laser focus in your recruitment efforts, right, on teachers of color, educators of color. And then the flip side of that too is making good use of our government relations person, our lobbyists, to figure out what we can do to reduce barriers to licensing, to increase that pool of people that we can tap.
Love it. And I say this all the time to Kelly, so she's over there raising her hand. There's a mic in front of you, I believe, Kelly.
And I think it's not the institutional barriers that are with the licensing. It starts earlier with the institutional barriers that are in our higher ed system. So we can do all we can to support our kids when they're with us, but then when we get them to graduate, 4-year cohort, 5-year cohort, GED, whatever it takes, and then they get to the university level, and if they don't have the support to navigate that system, and we're taxed out over here, higher ed has to change how they support our students once we get them there.
Okay. Just to give you a little bit of a reflection of an experience, I was one of, I think maybe 2 board members who attended the all-staff picnic, which was super fun and awesome and hot. And
That's 'cause
I
you
happened
didn't
to
sit in the shade like I did.
Yeah, I know. I was out with my kids doing the big giant Jenga. I actually brought my kids and my husband, who's black, and it was really emotional for him. He was shocked, and he was just like, I don't feel comfortable here. This doesn't look like my neighborhood. And I haven't been in a place that white in a long time, and that's not your fault, right? I mean, there are reasons for that, but I think it is something that could take quite a while to turn around. I mean, people have to retire and they have to leave, and that takes time. We're talking about a big change. So, but I would just say, like, the reflection of, he was really shocked. He was just like, whoa, I feel really visible right now. And so that makes me think, what are we doing to ensure that the teachers of color that we do recruit want to stay? And I think those data, exactly, those data would help. But maybe, I don't know if they do, maybe they feel fine and the teacher mentorship program is working.
I don't know. As we have more targeted recruitment efforts, that question of how we retain, because I've been there, right? Like, you're the person in the room, and to be able to have strong mentorship from other educators, even if they're not district educators, outside, mentorship programs, to make sure that we're retaining that talent is going to be more critical as we increase kind of our focus on recruiting educators of color. Yeah.
And I want you to know we are reaching out to every district imaginable to get ideas around recruitment and retention.
Yeah.
And they're where we're at. Not most are. They're working on it and trying to find the best strategies to use. We have some of our organizations, COSA, we were just at a meeting, and they're working on a plan to help all the districts. So just know we're reaching out. We're trying to get every bit of information we can to put into practice.
Thank you. And it is long-term change work, right? And I'm just wondering, because all it takes is one, because there's so few educators of color, all it takes is one to make that difference in that child's life. What can we do in the meantime until that until the long-term change happens? Whether it's partnering with CBOs or partnering with other culturally specific nonprofits to get more people of color that are positive mentors into the spaces where kids are interacting, whether it's in the classroom or after school, or how do we,
that would be another
son, yes, thank you, Multnomah County.
My kids have never had a son teacher that has been non-white. The agency is culturally specific, but the people working there.
There's an opportunity for members of our board, if they would like, they can get in touch with Principal Byer on a mentorship program at the high school, and they can be paired with somebody.
An educator, you mean, or like a, or
Kids.
kids?
Adults,
Yeah.
We have an official mentor program.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Like
Send me those kids that like want to run for office.
All right.
Thank you.
Are we
Connie.
ready to move on?
Teachers here.
Oh, dang it. Civic engagement.
Okay, so let's move on to the student-based health center update. I think we have a piece of paper here in front of us, and Barb is gonna lead that discussion for us.
Thank
Or
you.
More of an update, so less of a discussion probably.
So tonight, Alex Lowell, who is the manager of the Student Health Center, so they've rebranded this summer. They are now called the Multnomah County Student Health Center rather than school-based health centers. So their new logo I put on this summary sheet. So Alex was unable to be here. I also invited Kristen Case, who's the nurse practitioner at our Student Health Center, and she was unable to be here. But Alex gave me some data. And I said I really would like to see comparison between where we were last year, because I thought that's probably what you were most interested in. When I just got the numbers for the 7 weeks that they've been open this year, I thought, okay, that doesn't tell us a lot. Didn't tell me a lot. I thought it probably wouldn't tell you a lot unless we had some comparison. So she was able to run some additional data that you have there. So you can see that in 2016 there were 32 contraceptive methods dispersed. Of those 32, 14 of them were either prescriptions, this was last year, so they were prescriptions for birth control pills, injections, or a patch, and then, or they were condoms. So I don't have a breakdown of which is which. Condoms were the only thing they could distribute on site, the others were prescription. What they don't know is how many of those prescriptions were filled, because there's no way to track that. Out of that 32, there were 18 emergency contraceptives, and again, those were prescriptions that were given to students, and we don't know if those were filled. That EC emergency contraceptive is the Plan B pill. There were no, what they call LARCs, learned a whole new acronym here, the long-acting reversible contraceptive methods. So those would be things like IUDs and implants, which are really the most effective. There were none of those last year. So
Do they do that there in the clinic?
They do. Now, not last year.
No, I know.
Yes.
No, I'm just,
Yes.
I wasn't sure because it's
Yeah.
nurse practitioners, so I wasn't sure if they.
So now, this year, since they've been open the last week of August, they have distributed 38 contraceptive methods. Of those, 18 have been either pills, injections, patch, or condoms. 9 of them have been the emergency contraceptive. So that is down, and that's what they would like to see. They don't want to be, they want students to be proactive rather than reactive after the fact, after they've had sex and then they decide, hey, wait a minute, I think I need an emergency contraceptive here. And then there were 11 LARCs, so 11 of those long-acting reversible contraceptive methods like the IUD or implants. And they would like to see those increase typically because they are more effective at preventing pregnancies. So they were glad they pulled the data. They said they would love to come and do a report another time. They would like to even supply us the data quarterly if you are interested in that, so you could track it all year long. But they said just anecdotally, kids were very grateful to be able to have access to more birth control options.
But it's interesting, what do we have, 3,000 kids? That's a drop in the bucket there.
And I'm sorry if I missed this, but the numbers in 2016, is that for the whole school year? Or is that
No,
just?
that was same time this
Same
year.
time, okay.
Yep.
There's no information here about what kind of messaging or communications work has been done to message out that these services are now available. Can you share about that?
I did not ask them that question, and so I can definitely get back and ask them that.
Okay.
I don't know, I don't.
I imagine it's the grapevine and it went through that high school like.
Yeah, that's not good enough. There has to be some sort of formal spread the word campaign, you know. Okay.
Well, I mean, I can,
Dan's gonna.
Dan?
So,
good.
Cool. Okay, so this is not having had any information formally sent out.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I'll ask that.
Okay, okay.
And have that sent out to you.
I know Multnomah County, they should still be doing the brochures so people, all the families at the elementary level get where the health clinics are, and that's in many languages, quite a few languages.
That's still available.
I'll ask Alex and Kristen myself, but
Okay.
if when they include stuff for the board, if they're able to, because it is generic without releasing information, male and female.
Okay.
And then also, how many of the dispensed, certainly not the emergency contraceptives in my mind, because that's a separate thing, but how many are dispensed without counseling? Again,
That's a really
I'm not
good
interested
question.
in the emergency ones. You know what, they're gonna handle that. But, because we have a policy that is, it comes with the counseling, it comes with that unless imminent need, right? And then they still go ahead and they take care of it. But just a percentage breakdown.
Okay.
And they know I'm gonna ask for that.
I'd like to see counseling data for both 2016 and 2017 overall as well.
What they had said in the past that they would not, I mean, they were all, well, there was counseling with all of the prescription in the past, so, but I can ask them that, but just to confirm.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay, moving on. Other business and future agenda items. I do have other business tonight. At your places was the purchase sale agreement for the property that we surplus at a previous board meeting. And so I need a motion on the purchase sale agreement.
I move that we approve the purchase and sale agreement of the Gateway property,
Okay.
according to the purchase sale agreement that we have before us.
I'll second it.
Okay, now it's open for discussion. Does anybody
was
want to
surplus.
discuss?
There's no discussion.
Appears to be a good way to,
It's a good leverage of assets.
yeah, good
Yeah.
leverage of assets, a good way to improve what, quite honestly, is an eyesore right now.
Yes, it's.
Yeah, I mean, that's putting it mildly, and it's not a good reflection on.
Valuable eyesore.
You what?
A valuable.
A valuable
A
eyesore.
valuable eyesore, but it is an eyesore. And it's a way to maybe lift the eyes, or the awareness of the district, you know, in doing something, and then in a few years, if we can build a school there,
Yeah.
fantastic.
And I know Pat's not here tonight, but is there any word on like a tear down of the Elks Lodge property? Because that is like the number one, okay, so I have these like neighborhood watch meetings I go to in my neighborhood, and it's all old people. I'm not kidding, that's who comes, really old people, and that's what they ask me. Didn't the school district buy the Elks property? What are they doing with that? And I'm like, well, we're gonna tear it down because it's a total hazard. But the reason why they're asking is because sometimes the older people that I meet at these meetings actually belonged to that. And so they have fond memories and, you know, they want to reminisce and all that jazz. Anyways, so do you have any information on when that may be torn down so we can get that?
They can get a brick.
Yeah. So we can get that eyesore out of there.
A piece of mold.
Yeah, a piece of mold.
There is no formal plan right now or timeline I could share with you. There are conversations because of the condition of the building. What is the next step? Really, there's nothing we can use it for other than limited storage right now. So that will be coming, but
I thought we had talked with the fire department about them practicing on it.
yeah, that didn't pan out.
Okay.
So doesn't mean it won't. But at this point, there was no formal plan developed to say, yes, this is what's going to happen. They have certain guidelines, rules, processes they follow about what
They probably don't like the
buildings they use.
asbestos and the mold in it either.
It's a big deal. It's a giant building. Obviously, it's a very large building. Yeah. So.
Okay. Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Is there any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes. The other thing that I want to bring up in other business is there's this other calendar, this new calendar that everybody has at their place, and I think it might have been in the packet. So the yellow meetings are our regularly scheduled board meetings, and the blue meetings are that extra second meeting that we have on the board, on the agenda. So we'll try and schedule workshops and different things on that night. But if we don't have anything, we're gonna cancel it. So it's not just a,
So yellow,
yellows
what I'm
show
used
up.
to.
Better go.
Yellow's
Yeah.
what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Blue is opportunity meetings.
Right.
That's a good way to put it.
And if we don't have anything going on, we'll cancel it early enough so people aren't, I mean, we're not gonna like cancel it
I don't
on
need to
Wednesday
change a flight
night.
to come home.
Right.
Well, what we'd like is just people to recognize that as a potential
Save the
meeting night, so they aren't booking other things, and Lori doesn't have to go all the doodle polls to who's available when.
And we're still trying to get the workshop, that third workshop from OSBA scheduled.
Are you missing people still?
Yeah, me.
So, there's that.
I just got a new job and I'm trying to figure out my flying schedule. and-
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I think, do I have any other business? I didn't come with a list today, like last time, so I don't have a whole, Kyle, you have something?
Well, I have something that, it's not a board report, so I will ask permission just to review something, and if you would like it later, but I can clarify some Robert's Rules things for some issues that we may have had, and it would be other business, technically.
Yeah.
So would you mind?
No, go for it.
So, without a change by the board initiated by board leadership, okay, so where we are today, just letting everybody know. We have a statement that the board will not respond, like that was what was shared, the board will not respond to testimony. Point of order overrides that because it's not a response. They're not, a board member saying point of order is speaking to the chair. There's no interaction. The board member may interact, but there's no formal interaction. So that's not, the way we are now, that's not improper. That interaction is solely between the board member calling for point of order and the chair. The chair's rule is what we go with, and it is basically, it will be final in almost all instances. However, a board member can appeal the chair's decision, okay? Which we hired figuratively board leadership, so why would we appeal their decision? But it's built in. You can appeal their decision. Immediate interrupt, you say that I want to appeal the board's, I appeal the chair's decision. It needs a second, and then it's a vote. There's no debate. That happens, right? So that can occur. And then the only other thing just to bring up is that as other people share their views when these things are happening, you will run into, eventually, the opportunity for a board member to object to the consideration of a question, which is when a point of order happens and someone else interjects. Someone can object to consideration of their question. And that's an immediate interrupt, no second, there's no debate. And the issue with that, though, because we are all equal, the chair runs the meeting, but we're all equal, that isn't a majority, that's a 2/3 vote. So you really have to get people to agree with you if you're going to interrupt. I don't want to use names, but we're all family, right? So if Bryce calls for point of order and I start to speak, I'm going to get to speak unless 2/3 of you tell me I can't. So you are allowed to, I mean, but it is not respectful, I guess I'll put it that way. It should be, point of order should be between the board member and the chair, and then once the chair rules, then take your opportunity. Just other business. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to.
Can you come to one of our board briefings and do a Robert's Rules of Order training with us?
I can. I actually think we can get that from professionals.
Yeah, can we?
But I'm happy to do it
Yeah.
because then it's like, family and we can get into it without other people around.
And why are we required to use Robert's Rules of Order?
I think it's policy.
Is it,
adopted.
is it statewide?
We've adopted
Okay,
a
okay.
policy.
Oh, okay, cool.
We as a board, so we've adopted, the board, we didn't, it's our policy. We use Robert's Rules of Order. The board can choose, and this is, my advice is this is always left to board leadership because they're the ones that have to run the meetings. The board can choose a loose version of Robert's Rules, which we kind of functionally do that, but when we get into issues, because we have not defined that we are using loose Robert rules, there can be, well, literally, I'll just put it plainly, there can be ethics violations, which is why I always try to lean forward and help everybody out so that we don't go down that path.
I think there are enough new members that it makes sense to have a training.
I love that. I also think it brings up something that we talked about in our board retreat about how we're going to behave together and how are we going to interact with one another. And I think that if we haven't actually had that discussion. So, and that's one of the things that we are going to talk about in November. My bad that I haven't come back to Lori about that, but I think that we should all figure that out because I think that would help our meetings run more smoothly.
You might want to check at the conference. A lot of times they'll do a session on Robert Rule. Not every
I'm not
time.
talking about the Roberts rules. I get that, but that's how you make decisions and how you have a discussion.
But I'm just saying,
but it's
if
more
someone
just
wants
like
some training. They're often I'll have that.
Yeah.
So if ever I'm leaning forward and you don't want to hear it, just tell me. I'm happy to not, but there's a reason that I'm doing it, so.
Well, obviously, I'm far from an expert on Robert's Rules because I have no clue. I know I motion in a second, that's all I know.
So two things, obviously training we'll follow up on, I'm hearing that, and there's a couple different ways that could happen. It depends on November and screening, and it doesn't matter who got back to what at this point, other than please do, because I don't know even if everyone got back, we have a common date, to be quite honest with you. So this could be something that we just put into, I'll talk to board leadership about. Yeah, so I didn't think so. But, one of our next board meetings, we do have scheduled board meetings to where we can have a training. We can call OSBA, have Steve Kelly come or a representative from OSBA to do a training on Robert's Rules. We absolutely, and then we could ask those questions. That's what they do. So I know they'd be happy to do that. And then with the addition of the possibility of the second evening, I know that's a little later and we probably want to wait, but anyway, we will work on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there other business?
Is this where we request other agenda items?
Future agenda items, yeah.
I would love to have a Measure 98 briefing.
Yeah.
What?
Measure 98.
Oh, okay. John would really love everybody to understand that.
I would love to, so kind of in response to some of the testimony that we heard around behavioral specialists, I would like to explore kind of what our discipline looks like overall and specifically explore the restorative justice model that I know is happening pretty well in Reynolds School District. So they're working with Resolutions Northwest. I would love to invite them to come in and talk about the RJ model and just general non-punitive disciplinary practices. I was really disconcerted to hear about some of the examples of parents and their kids in our elementary schools. So we can address that at the root by looking at our overall approach to discipline, I think. I'm also interested in inviting the Bus Project to come and present on the possibility of registering voters at the high school. That's just an interest that I have. I'm just putting it out there.
Did we do that already? Register voters?
Yeah, we try to get anyone that's 18 to register.
You can register at 17.
Yeah, you just have.
Or maybe that's just maybe we can just talk about that as a practice, like doing that, right? We don't need to have a briefing on it. But I think voter engagement would be something to work on. And then, so we heard some testimony tonight around the fact that there's still some continued tension between community and board around comments that were made in previous board meetings. And, we didn't hear tonight from any directly impacted communities. And I know that we have focus groups, or I saw there was like a Native American night, and I want to hear from our communities directly how they're feeling, how they're doing. Can we have report backs from those meetings? Because they happen and I never know what's discussed, like what the sentiments are on the ground. So I would love to have report backs on those and then kind of move forward from there.
Okay.
Yes, the answer is yes. I'm looking at Kelly and Andy because they kind of, but yes, the answer is yes. And actually the next round, we'll make sure the invitation's out for board members to attend as well. If it meets your schedule, we'd love to have you there, but yeah.
Thank you.
I know you were funded originally from EPAP, or you're trying to figure out funding to do more of them?
Well, we're still continuing with EPAP, and we're going to continue to make it happen one way or the other. So we are working with EPAP through that process, but we're committed to it. Again, it's kind of part of our goals, to be quite honest. It's the right thing to do, to be quite honest, and we're very interested and excited to move forward with it. So, Kelly, do you want to add a few things?
Well, I was just going to say the EPAP grants just came out to apply for grant money. So.
We're just wrapping up the last EPAP grant.
I know it.
Andy and I have been working on that and trying to spend it out before the grant cycle, that grant cycle ends, though. So.
Okay. I just had a couple of things I just thought of. I just want to remind board members that when parents complain about things that happen to their children in school, make sure that they've touched base with their principal, and that there's some action being taken, hopefully swift action. You know.
We're not supposed to be like that guy in the video in
Yeah,
the training?
exactly. We're not supposed to be like the guy in the video in the training.
All right.
You know, go ahead. I mean, I believe we should all investigate those things and move forward with that kind of stuff, but definitely let's get some immediate resolution at the building level if possible. And then I also wanted to get an update on the equity committee, and have you guys managed to sync up schedules? so
Our
you can-
schedules, man. I think we talked about meeting before or after this meeting, but it's pretty late right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to pick up our kids, so
Yeah.
might be a few minutes. Or we're not supposed to talk about that, I guess.
So one observation from our meeting structure, I mean, the intent of breaking up the two meetings was so that we would have one exec meeting. I know there was some miscommunication around when our exec meeting was, so we ended up missing the first one, because in theory, we would have had an earlier start time in this meeting. We would have started at 6. We wouldn't have 2 exec meetings every month, right? We'd only have 1. And then what we could do is during the special briefing time is cut out some time for committee meetings during that time as well. That way we're not having to schedule and scramble around outside of those 2 meeting dates, but we already have built in the legislature's task force time, but we would have, our committee time built into that date, so.
Which would be amazing as long as board leadership chooses not to schedule an executive meeting, which is totally their call.
Well, we've got the next November and December. We've only got 1 meeting scheduled each month because of the holidays that are, it disrupts the schedule a little bit. So.
And January too, yeah?
No, January, we got 2 down there.
Well,
Well,
yes.
there's not a blue in there.
So, and to point out, in January, there was, you received 2. You received the original packet, which had the 25th blue. Please note that on this one, it is not blue, is because we're at a state meeting. It's called OACOA, the cabinet's at. Now, to be quite honest, you guys could meet without us, so,
Okay.
so we could do something around that. But as we started looking at it, we just kind of added some dates and tried to get something in front of you. And then when we really cross-reference, that doesn't work for the leadership team of the district. But, yeah.
Okay. Do we have other business, other business or other future agenda items?
Well,
Go ahead.
I kind of hesitate because of the lateness of the hour, but, so, Kyle kind of brought it up, but I think it was more of as an example, Kyle, about the statement that the board will not respond to any comments or questions during public comment that's on our agenda for tonight.
Right,
But that statement does not appear on the, the public meeting guidelines for conduct that was, that I referenced earlier. So I guess I'm just, which one are we operating under?
So I would just ask that board leadership just clarify that for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, and having said that, because I'm sorry, Christine, you're probably not going to make a ruling tonight, right now.
No,
Okay.
we'll have to discuss.
But, so having said that, and I respect your, you and Frida perhaps to discuss it and decide what decision you want to make, but if I could just make a little input on that. It's, maybe I'm not the right one to be making these comments, but it's getting very tiring, and I was trying to express my frustration of hearing over and over and over again something that the board has already dealt with on at least 2 occasions when we dealt with complaints in board meeting, and then on another occasion when a censure motion did not pass. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, the public has the right, you know, to come here, but they don't have the right to waste our time. And they don't have a right to attack board members' cultural upbringing, religion, all of which have been attacked. I've been attacked by all those items. And it's all based on the lie that a member of the public wanted to try and get her position out by misrepresenting what I said on March the 9th. And it's been repeated again that I've never made an apology. Well, that is absolutely false. I have made an apology. But nobody heard me because they either didn't want to, they want to continue this, this role, and it just is, it's getting tiring. So I have apologized if people misunderstood my words. It's been said. And I know what I'm saying is not going to necessarily stop certain people, because they're just, they feel that they have a audience and a platform to come here, and they're continuing to do that, but they're wasting our time. So I would just encourage the board to please, the board leadership to make clear about the comments and questions during public comment, because it wasn't clear, and I feel personally affronted, and I have, I believe, a right to defend myself, especially when it's not true. Thank you.
Is there any other, do you have anything, Stephanie? Other business future agenda items?
I have a board report.
Any other business future? Okay, let's move on to board member reports. Kyle.
Well, thank you. I was even leaning forward. So hopefully I'm not piggybacking too much, but I was traveling a lot this last month, but I certainly appreciated very much, because I would have missed it, that Anna shared the article regarding the success of the 2 middle schools specifically being in the top 5%. I very much appreciate that, by the way, because I would have missed it. So my report on that, though, is a little bit akin to something that I shared when Candy presented. Here's this great news, and it is great news. There's still upside, and we can continue. But some of the conversation that happened around that was, well, this other school, you know, they need to do work here. And my thought to that was that, yeah, I guess maybe we should have all 3 middle schools in the top 5% of the state, right? I mean, why wouldn't we want that? But there's this disparity between, in my opinion, the reality of our efforts and our result. I leaned back, my goodness. The reality between our efforts and our results and the expectation that's out there. And I just want to share, again, I alluded to it when Assistant Superintendent Wallace was sharing the presentation earlier today. The district is doing good work, but just because you're doing good work doesn't mean we're not going to keep applying pressure. But understand that we're not asking you to move mountains today. We just want the mountains moved. And if there's ever a concern on that, certainly please, I know you're probably pretty comfortable coming to me, but if there's concerns on that, be sharing it with Ken. Make sure the administrators are sharing it. Make sure that everybody knows that just because we want things now doesn't mean we don't understand that they take time. And just because we want things to be better doesn't mean that we don't think things are really good. So that's my board member. And again, thank you, because I would have missed that. Thanks, that's mine.
Board member report. So I attended an early learning conference at Portland State University on Friday. It was called Preschool for All. And a couple David Douglas preschool teachers were there, and they approached me and they said how much of a difference they've noticed in the tenor of their staff meetings and in the overall climate of their work environments since this new board took office. So I just want to commend everyone for the change in tone, the change in clearly expressed values and priorities, and acknowledging that, yes, we are a district that has outperformed others, but that does not mean that we have a lot of work to do in many other areas. And having new leadership on the board and having some fresh vision and perspective is being noticed, and it has that trickle-down effect. So these are teachers that I'd never met before in my life, and for them to hear them say that just reflects, I think, that we're moving in the right direction. And just because we're in the right direction doesn't mean we're going to get where we're going tomorrow, right? But we are going in the right direction. I think that's noteworthy.
Okay, I'm going to say Frida for.
Oh, I'm only going to say one thing.
Oh, okay, then I'll let you, then you can go.
Because I'm your housing expert here. Anyway, I wanted to let you know, I was at City Council, last Wednesday. I got to remember when I testify on things. But the framework was accepted by City Council, so they're starting to collect the RFPs and stuff, proposals for building affordable housing and the bond. And there was concern about the framework because it seemed to redline East Portland. That was the opinion of some of my housing group. So I made sure when I testified, I explained to council that they had to be very careful with when they were accepting proposals, that we weren't excluded just because we weren't an opportunity area, as they call it. So, but anyway, the money, they're hoping to do turnkey and purchase apartments to rehab. So probably within the next 6 months, we're going to start to see some things really happening.
Bryce, do you have any board member report?
I'm sorry, I guess that was kind of my other business board member report.
Well, Stephanie, I know, has a board member report.
I do, and that is that the fundraiser that we launched for Menlo Park Parents, menloparkparents.com, basically has raised $1,268 in response to the racist attacks on the school. And the parents are very excited, hoping to do something. I know that we want to contribute to the effort to make things right. I also think it's important to maybe do something physical that's an art project or something that's inclusive, that reminds kids that they're all welcome. And then in closing, I would just say that what Anwar said today about what he and those students did at David Douglas, how they created statements of values. And they said, if you agree with these values, I want everyone to stand up. And they had 3,000 students stand up. We should be doing that here. Because we have a lot that we fight about, and we should, because we're all fighting for the things we believe in. We also have things in common. And I want to take the leadership from them. And I'd love for those students to actually come here and walk us through that exercise. That's all.
You talk to Amber about that. Okay. I don't have a huge board member report. I do want to note that Shrek the Musical is coming up. Tickets are on sale now. It'll be in the PAC. There's a very similar looking to me person playing in the pit on the clarinet that's 3 inches taller than me, but okay, well, whatever. I'm short. But Shrek the Musical is coming up. And I know the students, there's a lot of students that participate in not just acting, but I mean, our stagecraft classes do a ton of work. We're at the PAC from 6 to 8 practicing, dropping the kid off and all that stuff. So there's a lot of activity going on with that. So it should be fun. People should go there. And Mr. Givler will gladly send you an email if you sign up on his list, and he will email you every time there's something coming out, and you'll know this. So, and I think that's it for tonight. Adjourned.
Thank you, Christine.